Chapter 7:15. It was different from the defensive barriers produced by external mystic artifacts, which required a large amount of mystic energy to activate. For example, in the assembly hall earlier, in order to expand the range of the defensive barrier, for mystic cultivators were required to use defensive mystic artifacts at the same time. The water spiritual barrier that Arbor comprehended now didn't require the help of any external objects. As long as one had sufficient spiritual energy, the water spiritual barrier's range could be large or small, and it only required a little spiritual energy to maintain the barrier for a long time. Compared to a large-scale defensive barrier, this was naturally more flexible, and less energy-consuming. Of course, if one encountered someone as powerful as Mo Lien, then it didn't matter and didn't care about the energy consumption. The technique chapter also specifically stated that very few people could comprehend this kind of full-body defensive spiritual barrier. Most people could only achieve a localized defense, such as a spiritual shield, a spiritual wall, or a spiritual armor that could produce a spiritual energy bracer, chest, and helmet. However, the little fellow felt that producing a spiritual armor was more impressive. She was currently wrapped in a thin water membrane. No matter how she looked at it, it was strange. The layer of water surrounding his body was as soft as a mutated eggshell. She poked it with a finger, and the water membrane softly protruded out a finger's length, feeling cool. Sigh, she couldn't escape the fate of being an egg. She was still disdainful, completely unaware of how strange it was for a little mystic cultivator to create a water spiritual barrier. Arbor floated downstream. Aside from worrying that Mo Lien would be anxious, she wasn't afraid at all. She simply sat inside the water spiritual barrier and swayed along with the current. Coo! The little chick climbed up from behind her wet shoulder and sat on it. This underground water was too turbulent. If it hadn't been for the quick thinking of grabbing a strand of its master's hair, it would have been swept to who knew where. This underground river branched out in all directions. Who knew if it would be swept to the deepest part of the Earth's core, never to return? When the little chick thought of this, it shuddered and then looked at Arbor with adoration. Master, did you create this water spiritual barrier? His little master was such a troublemaker. She casually made a cover that could isolate the underground water, and he could finally take a breather. Xiao Mu sighed as she petted the little chick's head. She then took out the hidden night pavilion's jade messenger tablet from her inner world. Mo Lien must be very anxious right now, so she decided to leave him a message first. I'm fine. Let's meet in Bailon City. After he finished writing, Arbor put away the talisman pen and waited patiently for a while. Seeing that there was no reply, he put away the communication jade tablet. Don't worry. Mo Lien will see it later. She won't be worried. A certain person comforted himself with a few words, calmed himself down, and looked around again. Dian, where do you think I'm drifting to? She didn't even know where the underground water led to. Would it directly wash her into the river? Wait a little longer, master. We'll reach the end soon. As the water baby's words fell, Arbor only felt the rumbling of the water beside his ears. His eyes suddenly lit up, and his body was instantly suspended in the air. Dear Xiao Mu only had time to cry out, "Fuck," before her entire body fell from the sky. It turned out that after she was washed out of the cave by the underground water, she was washed down by a jade waterfall that was 3,000 feet high. The little chick shrieked and covered its eyes with its wings. Wah! Darling Xiao Mu let out the first shriek since her rebirth. A little green face was frozen in time. Chapter 7:16. What do you mean it's going to end soon? This is a waterfall falling straight down from the sky. Our dear Xiao Mu was wrapped in a soft water spirit barrier. Her small body was dizzy as she tumbled down, tumbling all the way down. If someone was watching at this moment, they would definitely think that she was very funny. The little fellow was like a small animal wrapped in a transparent soft ball. With one tumble, she was jolted by the waterfall and fell over headfirst. With another tumble, she righted herself again, her small hands and feet constantly swinging to maintain her balance. Arbor was speechless. The waterfall was abnormally steep. Arbor fell from the sky in a straight line to the lake below with a bang. It was only a matter of seconds. Her heart went through a hair-raising roller coaster ride. When her entire body fell into the lake, she couldn't react for a long time. Her body kept sinking in the lake water. Pfft. After a moment, a certain Chow Moo's small head finally emerged from the lake. She spat out a bead of saliva and wiped her small face with her hand. Coo! The little chick lay on her messy bird's nest hair. Its feathers were all wet and withered, and it couldn't help but gasp for air with its small mouth open. The little chick spat out 3 mouthfuls of water in a row and cried out pitifully, "Master, let's go up quickly." Arbor looked around. The night was dark. Arbor looked around. This lake was not even 1/10 the size of her peach blossom lake. One side was the waterfall, while the other 3 sides were mountains whose peaks couldn't be seen. At a glance, she didn't know where the clouds and fog were. "I wonder if we've returned to the ground." Arbor muttered and swam towards the lake shore. The little chick lay on her head and cooed, "Master, master, look at my wings. They can't be pulled up." "Ah." Arbor pulled her down from her head and held her in her hands. "Weak chicken, there's a cut on your wings. It must have been accidentally scratched by a sharp rock when you fell into the water from the crack in the ground." "I don't know. Normal rocks can't hurt me." Qing Yuan was very puzzled. When did it become so weak? After that, the 2 of them squatted inside the water spirit barrier. Even if they fell straight down from a high altitude, they were not injured. Little Chickie spat out 2 more mouthfuls of water. "Don't worry, master. It's just a small wound. I'll bring you up later." Arbor swam ashore, looked down at his wet clothes, and frowned. "Little ball, pull us in." "Yes, master." Cho paused for a moment before asking, "What about that snake?" The little snake came out of her waist pocket and glanced at Arbor with its watery eyes. "Pull them in together." "Oh." Cho replied reluctantly. With her current cultivation, it would be rather strenuous for her to recruit a newcomer to Paradise Planet for the first time. Thus, when Cho heard that she would have to recruit another little snake, it was somewhat unhappy. Moreover, this little snake was obviously here to compete with Cho for favor. Cho was even more displeased. After entering Paradise Planet, Arbor left the little snake behind and hurriedly ran back to her little treehouse to change into a clean set of clothes. When she came out of the treehouse, she was holding many bottles and jars in her hands. "Weak chicken, the wound on your wings is quite serious. Don't move around, let me take a look." Arbor frowned and reached out to carry the little chick onto her lap and began to treat the wound on its wings. On the other side, the little water child was staring at the little snake with a serious expression. "You can't crawl around here, and you can't steal the vegetables in the field." Chapter 7:17. Little cute snake and little water child looked at each other. Swaying its little snake tail, it slithered over to Arbor's feet. Suddenly, it fell limply onto the ground. The little snake's lively eyes swept over everything in Paradise Planet, its watery eyes containing a trace of pleasant surprise. "Wow, this place's mystic energy is so dense, I like it so much." Little water child immediately became alert. This scheming snake actually acted cute on the spot. How could this be? Luckily, Master was busy with the work in her hands and didn't have the time to care about this scheming snake. Humph. After Arbor finished cleaning the wound on Little Chick's wing, she suddenly made a sound of surprise. Little Chick stuck out its belly, and just as it was about to turn around, Arbor reached out and stopped it. Wait! Don't move. Arbor reached out and gently pressed on its wing. There seems to be a foreign object in your wing. Does it hurt? It doesn't hurt. Little Chick said muddle-headedly. When you fell just now, you were scratched by something. Think about it again. There's nothing. Little Chick's face was filled with confusion. It was so strong, and it was an ancient Qingwan, not a real chicken. How could it be injured by a few small stones? Wasn't this a joke? Don't move. There should be some stones in your wing. I have to take them out, or else your wound will still hurt when it heals. Master. Little Chick was moved to tears. Master was so good to it. It was rare to hear Master speak so gently. Usually, she was cold. Xiao Mu placed it on a glossy stone block under the peach tree. She then rummaged through her needle pouch and took out a small brass tweezer. It hurts a bit. I have to take out the foreign object in your wing. Bear with it. Arbor said in a low voice. Little Chick was so moved that it immediately wanted to cry again. Master, do whatever you want. It doesn't hurt. Arbor looked at it in confusion. She thought to herself, you're not afraid of pain. Why do you look like you're about to cry? She didn't know how to comfort people. Oh, no, she was comforting a chicken. She used her fingers to stroke the outside of the little chick's furry wings inch by inch. Then, she used the brass tweezers to probe the wound. She accurately pinched something and quickly pulled it out. It was a soft clump of dirt that was as thick as a thumb. Xiao Mu tossed this thing on the ground and poked it with her tweezers. She saw that a pinhole-sized hole had sunk into it, and it was incredibly soft. It would be too funny to say that Newbie had been scratched by a thumb-sized lump of dirt. Newbie didn't believe it, and neither did she. All right. Just apply some ointment on your wings and wrap them up. They should be fine by tomorrow or the day after. Ah, but Master, I have to send you up. Qingwan also saw that around the small lake, other than the waterfall, the other three sides were huge mountain ridges. I can do it myself. It's dark now, so we can climb tomorrow. Arbor quickly applied medicine and wrapped Qingwan with gauze. Master, there's someone outside, Cho suddenly said. Who is it? Arbor was a little puzzled. I let out my spiritual sense to take a peek. It's a bald little fatty. He just climbed up the shore. Cho jumped onto Arbor's hand and gestured. This kid is quite sharp. I used my spiritual sense to secretly size him up, and he looked around vigilantly. Arbor frowned slightly. Then how do I get out? Chapter 7:18. If she were to appear openly, wouldn't it raise suspicions? After all, what would people think if a person jumped out of nowhere? She didn't want to expose the secret of Paradise Planet in front of strangers. Why don't we wait for the little fatty to climb up before going out? Cho suggested. That's the only way. Arbor nodded. She got up and just as she took a step, she felt that she stepped on a piece of rotten mud. Squeak. Xiao Mu even inexplicably felt that the clump of dirt under her feet seemed to tremble slightly. She hurriedly lifted her little foot and rubbed it against the peach blossom tree next to her, rubbing that small piece of soft mud down and dropping it under the peach blossom tree. What the hell was that? Arbor deliberately squatted down and looked at it carefully for a while. It was just a small lump of mud that couldn't be more ordinary. Let's go to sleep first. We'll go out tomorrow morning and think of a way to climb the mountain. Qingwan's wings were injured, so it was better to let it rest for 2 days first. She wasn't a particular person. It wasn't difficult for her to climb a mountain with her hands and feet. One big and four small, twisting their small bodies, all ran back to their small residences. Arbor naturally returned to the treehouse she built herself. The little water baby built a small nest under the tree. At this moment, seeing the little snake swimming over, it immediately glared at it. "What are you doing? This place is where I'm lying." The little snake glanced at it and didn't pay attention to it at all. It twisted its small body and climbed up the tree trunk. It climbed all the way to the roof of the treehouse and found a place with luxuriant foliage to lie down there. Arbor returned to the treehouse and checked on the little white squirrel's condition again before falling asleep. However, she didn't know that Mo Lien had been feeling uneasy ever since the two of them separated. Now that he couldn't sense Arbor's aura at all, he suddenly felt that the sky was about to fall down. This feeling overlapped with a certain time 2 years ago, making him feel uncomfortable. In fact, after Mo Lien jumped into the fissure, she was separated from Arbor by the tributaries of the underground water veins. After Mo Lien emerged from a small pool, she discovered that she was already in the tent area outside the Bailon fortification. Under the night sky, the stars were bright. Although it was already late at night, there were many people in the tent area and it was noisy. It was impossible to calm down. By the time Feng Manyun was called over to examine the patient, it was almost late at night. When she walked out of the tent after washing her hands after seeing the patient, the sky was already filled with stars. "Dr. Feng, is there really nothing wrong with the patient?" Just now, he was making a big fuss and wanted to bite anyone he saw. He couldn't have mutated into a zombie, right? A deputy manager of the Shed district followed behind Feng Manyun. "Zombie transformation. It's not like he's dead." Feng Manyun glided ahead as she swept the manager an indifferent glance. "What problem can there be? You don't believe in my medical skills?" A young maidservant who was following closely behind Feng Manyun was holding a medicine chest with her sleeves rolled up. Upon hearing this, she scoffed, "Deputy manager, you can set your mind at ease. Our miss is one of the top 50 physicians in Celestial Medicine Valley. If she says there's no problem, then there's naturally no problem." That's good, that's good. How could the deputy manager dare to offend this great god of Celestial Medicine Valley? He naturally lowered his head and bowed as he repeatedly flattered her respectfully. The main reason was that there were many people in the Shed district. If something happened and they couldn't control it, the consequences would be unthinkable. Suddenly, Feng Manyun paused in her footsteps, and her gaze fixated ahead. She saw a slender and elegant figure quickly walking past her. Under the illumination of the moon, the young sir was truly as elegant as jade, unparalleled in his elegance. Speaking of which, did you guys draw a prize? Chapter 719. How's the little fatty doing now? The next day, Arbor woke up early, ate some porridge, and planned to leave Paradise Planet. Let's go, let's go. The little fatty is trying his best to climb up. He's been climbing for about half an hour. He should be far away by now. Cho-Cho chuckled. Master, you can go out now. Okay. Arbor reached out and picked up the little white snake, and had Cho-Cho send them out. She could only come out of Paradise Planet from where she entered, so she had to find a way to go up the mountain and take a look. It was already early in the morning. As soon as she walked out, she saw the small lake, which shimmered slightly under the morning dew. Arbor raised her head and looked at one of the mountain peaks. Just as she was about to take a breath and climb up, she suddenly heard a strange sound coming from the mountain peak. Following her line of sight, she saw something that looked like a meat bun rolling down the steep slope of the mountain peak. Seeing that, Arbor's eyes went blank. The bald little fatty rolled down from who knows where. He rolled, and he didn't have any defensive barrier on him. With a bang, he fell in front of Arbor with his butt facing the sky. Arbor couldn't help but twitch the corner of her mouth. She took a closer look and saw that the little fatty was in a daze from the fall. He was covered in cuts and bruises, and his entire person seemed to be in a daze as he lay on the ground for a long time. Only when Arbor couldn't help but cough lightly did he move his head slightly and look up. They saw that there were scars here and there on his chubby face. His face, which was originally like white flour, was now shaken by the rubble. This little fatty looked rather pitiful. "Why are you here?" The two couldn't help but ask in unison. The little fatty looked at Arbor with a confused expression, as if he didn't understand how a girl had appeared in the blink of an eye in a deserted place. Arbor didn't know that the bald little fatty Cho-Cho was talking about was actually Zhang Yu. Could it be that when she fell into the crevice, she caught a glimpse of that round thing from the corner of her eye? Was this guy? Cough. Arbor looked up at the mountain peak in front of her with her hands behind her back. Zhang Yu quickly said, "Wait. I advise you to look for another mountain to climb." Xiao Mu turned her head to look at the bald little fatty in confusion. Zhang Yu said, "Sigh, there's a row of strange people on this mountain peak. It wasn't easy for me to get up there, but they stopped me at the mountain entrance and forced me to answer their questions. I got it wrong, so they threw me down." Little Fatty thought that the young lady in front of him would definitely burst into laughter after hearing what he said. Who would have thought that the little girl would be expressionless and calm as if she had been paralyzed for 1,000 years? She only used a pair of black eyes to stare at him without blinking. Zhang Yu was a little embarrassed by her gaze, and he couldn't help but grin, revealing his white teeth. "Where's your pot?" "Walk." "What pot?" Little Fatty didn't expect this girl to ask such a strange question, so he subconsciously followed up with a question. As soon as he answered, he knew that something was wrong. Sure enough, in the next second, the girl's hand glowed with a cold light, and a handful of shooting stars flew towards him, aiming for his upper, middle, and lower acupoints. "Fuck!" Little Fatty jumped in fright, and immediately dodged to the side nimbly. He cried out in alarm, "Oh my God, the little girl killed someone, the little girl killed someone." Arbor waved her hand, and Debao suddenly appeared. Chapter 720. Arbor did not need to make a sound as Debao's body flickered with an ink-colored light. It was telepathic with its master. Debao did not need to hear Debao's order and immediately threw a punch at Debao's face. If Debao's punch landed, even if Debao did not die, Debao would be half dead. TSK, what a little fiend, little devil, little monster. Little Fatty teased as he quickly dodged to the side. Debao did not waste any time with him. Debao immediately tangled with Debao and threw a flurry of punches at him. Debao had been completely modified by Mo Lien. It now possessed the strength of a 5th-level body cultivator. Although it was just a mechanical puppet, its limbs were very flexible. It was almost no different from a real person. After Debao had exchanged more than 100 blows, Debao became more and more amazed at how talented the person who created this mechanical puppet was. If it were not for the metallic texture on Debao's face and body, Debao would have thought that it was a real person. Debao's moves were smooth. Its attacks and defenses were as smooth as flowing water. Debao did not even see Debao thinking. It could almost block his attacks in an instant. After such a fight, Debao's heart was bitter. He cursed in his heart. When he looked up, he saw that the little girl's nimble figure was already halfway up the mountain. Fuck! This girl is not a human. Debao panicked and wanted to rush up the mountain. However, Debao had already seen through his movements. Debao jumped up a few steps behind him and reached out to grab his left shoulder. Get down! Debao did a backflip and kicked Debao. Debao did not expect Debao to rush over and take his kick. Debao gave Debao a bear hug and threw Debao onto the mountain. Bam! Debao felt that his doughy face was about to be crushed. He really wanted to turn around and give Debao a big slap in the face. Is this the way you hug a man? Debao and Debao were still fighting at the foot of the mountain. Arbor had already climbed to the top of the mountain. She paused and suddenly activated an invisibility talisman on herself. Then, she calmly continued to climb up. When she was about 3 or 4 steps away from the peak, she suddenly saw a big red morning glory standing on the edge of the peak, facing the wind. Arbor stealthily made his way over. The big morning glory seemed to have sensed something and turned towards Arbor's hiding place. The big blooming morning glory spat out a continuous stream of poison. Then, as if a little puzzled, venom gurgled back. There was no one. Hee, this damned little fatty, he still wanted to deceive her. He knew that there was definitely something extraordinary on this mountain peak. Just now, little fatty must have been caught off guard and was hit by the poisonous morning glory's venom. He had dodged in a hurry and rolled down the mountain peak. Arbor hurriedly swallowed 2 antidote pills and rubbed his little hands subconsciously. He excitedly touched the back of the morning glory and revealed 2 white little teeth to the morning glory. Cho-Cho, did it take a lot of effort to bring it into Paradise Planet? Master, it doesn't take a lot of effort to collect plants. Cho-Cho immediately extended 2 small branches and whipped the big morning glory with lightning speed. Debao then effortlessly dragged it into Paradise Planet. Chapter 721. Cho-Cho, you're awesome. Arbor gave Cho-Cho a rare compliment before using her spiritual sense to take a look. She saw that Cho-Cho was currently violently beating up the poisonous morning glory until it was completely docile. If Cho-Cho could even beat up holy water, what else couldn't it beat up? This morning glory's scientific name was the 6-yang poisonous flower. It was one of the most poisonous poisons in the world, and it had a lot of practical value when stored on Paradise Planet. If one came into contact with even a tiny bit of its yang poison, their skin would feel as if it had been severely scalded. It would blister, rot, and heal continuously. In the end, the person would be tortured to death by this pain. This process wasn't the least bit pleasant. If she had added this 6-yang poisonous flower to the beautifying pill back then, it would have been even better. Consort Jing would have been in so much pain that she wanted to die. In comparison, the nether star seed that she had added wasn't as poisonous as the 6-yang poisonous flower. Arbor was in a great mood after taking care of the 6-yang poisonous flower. Her footsteps moved slightly, but she suddenly stopped. She raised her small foot and lowered her head to pick up a seed. Cho-Cho, what is this? Everything was related to plants, so asking Cho-Cho was always the right choice. As expected, Cho-Cho cried out excitedly when it saw the seed in Arbor's hands. Master, you've hit the jackpot. This is the seed of a longevity tree. Heavens, I haven't seen a longevity tree in a very, very long time. I didn't expect this 6-yang poisonous flower to be guarding a longevity tree seed on a cliff. Oh, my longevity tree. Longevity tree. Could it be that it was being refined? Arbor was thinking to this point when she suddenly heard a huge tremor from the bottom of the mountain. Her heart tightened, and she hurriedly handed the seed to Cho-Cho to bring back. She was already flying down the mountain. Her Debao had just been repaired, so she hoped that something didn't happen again. Arbor quickly flew down the mountain and saw Debao lying on top of the little fatty. The 2 of them were stacked on top of each other by the lakeside. The loud tremor just now was probably caused by the 2 of them falling down from the mountain peak and landing heavily on the ground. Debao shook his butt and got up from little fatty's body. He turned around and ran towards her while shouting, "Little master, Debao is going to be beaten to death by this person." Arbor's lips trembled. He hurriedly dodged and avoided Debao's hug. With a thought, a short, glowing ferrule appeared in her hand. The ferrule suddenly elongated, and Xiao Mu swiftly dashed to the little fatty's front. Without a second word, she smacked the little fatty's head with a devastating strike. "Fuck, you fierce woman." Little fatty's pupils suddenly shrank. He quickly rolled and crawled towards the lakeside. Then, he suddenly stood up like a carp. However, just as he was about to stabilize himself, Arbor waved her hand, and a stream of water flew up along her small hand. By the time it reached little fatty's neck, it had already completely condensed into a sharp ice spike, stabbing straight towards his throat. This was really too savage. She never wasted words with you, nor did she explain anything to you. She just fucking directly attacked you. Stop, 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 stop. I admit defeat. I'll return to my original form, okay? Little fatty's voice suddenly became thin, long, and gentle. A chubby face that looked like a round dough abruptly slimmed down, and all the bones in his body returned to their original positions. Soon, a smiling face appeared in front of Xiao Mu. See you tomorrow. Chapter 722. Arbor swung her little hand and directly rewarded her with a handful of small nails. I'll go. The woman's slender waist swayed slightly, and in an instant, she changed her position and swiftly jumped to the side, glaring angrily. Little girl, you're really vicious enough. I've already returned to my original state, what else do you want? The woman in front of her had the appearance of 27 or 28 years old, and her figure was very voluptuous. At this time, her body had become longer and slimmer, and a large robe was loosely covering her body, revealing 2 legs that were as smooth as jade. Wasn't this the snake beauty that they had bumped into in the underground village earlier? Her bare feet gracefully walked a few steps towards Arbor's side, and asked in a negotiating tone, "Little girl, our top priority right now is to leave this damned place. If there's anything, how about we talk about it after we get out?" Arbor glanced at her with an unpleasant expression, then turned her head and quickly climbed up the mountain peak. The snake beauty was so angry that her face was crooked, and she also climbed up the mountain peak. That damned brat, his tone was so stubborn that it was really annoying to look at. When the snake beauty reached the peak, she couldn't help but let out a sharp cry. Arbor turned her head to look at her, only to see the woman reach out to cover her small mouth, looking at her with a shocked expression. "Hey, little girl, where's that man-eating flower?" "What man-eating flower? It was just a 6-yang poisonous flower." Arbor wasn't willing to talk to an illiterate with shallow knowledge, so she proudly turned her pink and tender little face away. The snake beauty actually giggled enchantingly. With a sway of her slender waist, the snake beauty walked towards Arbor's side. Her pair of beautiful eyes looked around the peak, only to see pine trees planted on it. Apart from that, there was nothing else on the mountain peak. Arbor had already released her spiritual sense to search the vicinity. The nearby terrain was a bit strange. After going over this mountain peak, the ground seemed to have sunk in, and there was a large pit in front of them, one after another. The mountain path was rugged and uneven, so it would naturally be difficult for ordinary people to walk on it. Arbor and the snake beauty, on the other hand, were moving exceptionally fast. They followed a muddy mountain path and ran down from the back of the mountain peak. In front of him was an endless pit, as if it was a natural trap. If he missed a step at any time, he would completely fall into the pit. "Little girl, quickly release your golem to scout the way," the snake beauty said hurriedly. Arbor glanced at the snake beauty. "You go and scout." The snake beauty grinned and pursed her lips into a smile. "You're really stingy. The golem won't die even if it falls into a pit. We can just pull it out again." Arbor chuckled. The snake beauty couldn't help but twitch the corner of her mouth. "Miss, you'd better not laugh. That strange way of simulating laughter with your expressionless face is unbearable to look at." Arbor picked up a branch from the ground and threw it into a pit in front of him. Gulp. The wooden branch fell down and disappeared. It's over, Mississippi. There are so many potholes in front of us. It's impossible for us to walk through them on foot. Why don't you summon that flying mystic beast of yours? The Snake Beauty was naturally clear now that the little fellow wasn't some level 6 mystic cultivator. This little lass was too good at tricking people. Summon yours, Arbor said indifferently. Little sister, you're so stingy. How can people get along with you happily? Then scram. The Snake Beauty was about to choke to death. Chapter 723. How could there be such a loathsome girl in this world? Would it kill you to say something nice? Telling her to scram at the slightest provocation, where could she scram to? It was truly infuriating. Arbor ignored her and took another rotten branch and threw it into the air. After a soft, poochy sound, the branch was quickly squeezed by an external force and shattered into pieces that rustled and fell to the ground. The Snake Beauty reached out to touch her nose and subconsciously looked at the little girl. As expected, she was still expressionless. These days, it wasn't easy to deceive little children. If Arbor had listened to the Snake Beauty's words and let Blue One carry her through this area, she reckoned that she would have suffered injuries on top of injuries right now. The sky above this crater area was filled with strong profound energy. If a bird touched this layer of strong profound energy, it would be bounced off. If it tried to attack that, it would be mercilessly obliterated, just like that rotten branch just now. Arbor injected a faint trace of profound energy into the branch. As a result, it fell to pieces. That vast and mighty rebounding force faintly made Arbor's wrist feel somewhat numb. With her cultivation, wanting to break through this layer of strong profound energy in one strike was simply a fantasy. She secretly opened her profound eye and raised her head to take a look. She only saw traces of profound energy filling the air above this crater area, intertwining with each other. If she wanted to break through by force, it would simply be a dream. The only way was through the crater in front of her. You go first. Arbor coldly said. The Snake Beauty immediately shook her head like a rattledrum. I don't want to. I'm not going to walk in front of you. If by any chance you push me from behind, wouldn't I die unjustly? Then don't go. Arbor suddenly scattered a handful of poison powder. The Snake Beauty was caught off guard and inhaled a mouthful of poison powder. She choked and coughed repeatedly, her delicate little face completely distorted. Fuck. Where did this ominous star come from? Killing you just because of a disagreement. Wasn't this kind of demon that looked completely harmless on the surface more terrifying than the people of their underground village? Cough cough, cough cough cough. The Snake Beauty secretly cried out and covered her chest with her hand. What kind of poisonous powder was this? How could it be so powerful? The Snake Beauty hurriedly gathered the poison in her body and transferred it out of her meridians as quickly as possible. Cough, cough, cough. He was too careless. He actually fell for the little girl's trick. If it weren't for her special ability of shifting her body and twisting her muscles and veins, she would have been able to control her body at will. If it were someone else today, they would have been killed by this little girl. However, she had only moved the poison to a bone to store it. In fact, she had not completely eradicated the poison in her body. She transferred the poison to a more harmless part of her body, away from her heart and brain, and the dizziness disappeared in an instant. With a calm face, the Snake Beauty raised her head and looked forward with an ice-cold gaze. He saw that the little girl had already walked to the middle of the pit area. She held a sturdy tree branch in each of her hands. As she walked, she carefully used the tree branches to explore the holes around her. Then, she chose the solid holes to run through. Although her speed was a bit slow, she estimated that she would be able to leave this place in about 2 hours. This damned child was so narrow-minded that he didn't let her take advantage of him. He tricked her and didn't let her follow the path she had opened and smoothly pass through. Chapter 724. Arbor purposely threw a handful of poison powder at the Snake Beauty to prevent her from following. She wanted to prevent the Snake Beauty from reaping without sowing and taking advantage of her. Arbor's thoughts were, what a joke. Is it so easy for others to reap the fruits of my labor when I, this darling, am scouting ahead? It's better to walk your own path by yourself. I'll scout my path, and you'll scout yours. You want to follow my footsteps. No doors and no windows. How could she have found this kind of scheming child interesting and cute back then? The Snake Beauty was perplexed after much thought. How blind was she back then? The Snake Beauty pursed her lips and walked forward without saying a word. At first, the distance between the two was quite far, but gradually, Arbor discovered that the Snake Beauty was swimming up. Yes, she was swimming. Those pink and white legs slid on the ground very quickly, soft and boneless. Arbor simply stopped and turned to look at her. She discovered that the Snake Beauty's naked legs were covered in a thin layer of snake scales. Upon closer inspection, those snake scales didn't directly touch the ground, but were slightly more than half an inch away from the ground. It turned out that the Snake Beauty was a demonic cultivator who had fused with a type of demonic snake. Arbor mused that she had been tricked by this fellow. It turned out that she could pass through this pit area so easily. But she had pretended to be delicate before. Arbor watched as she swam forward and glanced at her back and forth in confusion. She was very clear about the poison she had used. Not to mention a mere demonic cultivator, even a powerful mystic cultivator would have to drink a pot of poison powder after inhaling it. But why was the Snake Beauty completely fine in such a short time? This body was too strange, right? Her recovery ability was actually so good. Little miss, are you very curious about my body? The Snake Beauty suddenly smiled at her. She abruptly opened her mouth and sprayed out a poisonous mist mixed with a fragrant wind. This was the venom that she had completely mastered after fusing with the demonic beast Fire Qilin-fanged snake. Now that she had modified it into a poisonous mist, most people would collapse upon inhaling it when she opened her mouth and spat it out, completely unprepared. TSK, stinky girl, you sprinkled a handful of poison powder on me, and I sprayed a mouthful of poison mist on you. Let's call it even. The Snake Beauty smiled wickedly at Arbor and stretched out her soft arms, intending to catch Arbor's body. Swoosh. A silver needle dipped in poison shot towards the Snake Beauty's eyes at close range. Startled, the Snake Beauty hurriedly bent her delicate waist, her entire body almost sticking to the mud, avoiding the silver needle that brushed past the tip of her nose. In the blink of an eye, Arbor had already summoned that club from his consciousness and furiously swept it down with a thunderbolt. Dang! A pair of short swords appeared on top of the Snake Beauty's head, and they crossed each other above her head. After blocking Arbor's ferocious attack, his body sank into the crater. Arbor flew up and bombarded the Snake Beauty's body 3 times in succession. Clang, 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 clang. He actually knocked half of the Snake Beauty's body into the crater. The Snake Beauty angrily glared at him. Little fellow, you didn't kill me when you sprinkled poison powder on me before. This time, you neutralized my poison mist, so we're even. Did you have to bury me in a crater? If it weren't for the fact that the situation was urgent, the Snake Beauty really wanted to laugh. Chapter 726. The little monk looked to be about 5 or 6 years old. His lips were red and his teeth were white. If the little girl didn't like this innocent and cute appearance, then she must be a pervert. She had taken the wrong path before. Of all the people she could transform into, she had to transform into that little fatty with an iron pot on his back. Oh right, she had also forgotten to take Fatty's iron pot. Thus, the little girl had seen through her at a glance. This was really a technical mistake. The Snake Beauty shook her head and straightened her clothes. At this moment, her body was extremely small. A pile of clothes hung on her body. She tore the clothes and tore a few pieces to wrap herself up. A handsome little monk wearing red clothes was born. If one looked carefully, there was a trace of evil charm in his eyes. The Snake Beauty took out a mirror and looked at herself for a while. No matter how she looked at it, she felt that it was very pleasing to the eye. Oh my, if the little girl still didn't like such a natural and cute appearance, then she had nothing to say. The Snake Beauty moved and chased in the direction of the long sparse forest. A light flashed through her beautiful eyes. How could a damn little girl be so hard to deal with? She didn't believe in this evil. Arbor had already arrived at the entrance of the long sparse forest. She let the little snake out and led the way in front. Thus, the journey was smooth and unhindered. They didn't see any stupid beasts blocking the way. What ferocious beasts! Bah! They didn't even see a single bird. This Snake Beauty was a big liar. It would be strange if they believed her. After leaving the long sparse forest, they saw a solemn ancient temple in front of them. It was surrounded by pine trees and the eaves of the corridor were rotating. The temple's door was closed. Arbor walked up the steps and knocked on the door. After a long while, there was no movement. She went to knock on the door again. Just when she was about to impatiently climb over the wall, the ancient temple's door opened with a creak. The first to come out was an old monk. He looked to be in his 60s. His body was very thin and his eyes were full of wisdom. When he saw Arbor standing outside the door, he was clearly stunned. For a moment, he stared blankly. Arbor also glanced at him, then lowered his head to look at the little monk who was following behind the old monk and tugging at the corner of the old monk's clothes. This little monk was about 4 years old. His small face was as white as jade, and his chin was round and bulging. He looked very cute. The little monk was very shy when he saw strangers. He shrunk behind the old monk's waist and only revealed his small bald head, curiously looking at Arbor. At this moment, the old monk had already regained his senses and asked, "Benefactress, this small temple has been abandoned for many years. It has already been a long time since we received any visitors." Arbor flipped his small hand, took out the jade talisman and handed it to the old monk. When the old monk saw the jade talisman, he was stunned. He looked at Arbor in a daze and then stepped aside to make a path. "Benefactress, please come in." The scale of this ancient temple was only average. The old monk said that the temple had been abandoned for many years, but the interior was still neat and tidy, clean and refreshing. "I am Kong Yin, the abbot of this small temple." As the old monk spoke, he invited Arbor into a meditation room. "I wonder where Benefactress got this jade talisman. I got it by chance in a deserted small town. I wonder why Great Master would ask this." Arbor said lightly. The old monk held the jade talisman and seemed to be emotional. Chapter 727. This sound transmission jade talisman is indeed an old friend's item. This old monk hasn't seen it for more than 10 years. The old monk sighed emotionally, then nodded at Arbor. "Please wait for a moment, Benefactress." Then he walked to the side of the meditation room, and took out a pitch-black box from a row of teak drawers. Reaching out his sleeve to stroke the box, the old monk held the box and stared at it blankly for a while. The little monk was wearing a small gray monk robe, kneeling on a small futon next to Arbor, his watery eyes constantly sizing up this foreign guest. The old monk held the black box and turned to face Arbor. After sitting down, he handed the box in his hand to Arbor. "Benefactress, this is yours." Jing Hong. Arbor didn't expect this trip to go so smoothly. There was no need for any handover procedures, and the old monk handed Jing Hong to her as soon as he saw the sound transmission jade talisman. Wasn't this a little too shocking? The old monk nodded and sighed deeply. This old monk has waited here for a full 14 years. From now on, I can finally resolve this obsession, and I have to thank this young benefactress for her help. Arbor asked curiously, "What is obsession?" The old monk stared at Arbor in a daze, and muttered to himself, like. Even the question he asked was exactly the same. Like what? The old monk didn't say anything, but Xiao Mu was completely baffled by his words. She looked at the old monk and said, "If you had experienced life and death and faced the most unbearable past, perhaps you would know that obsession and whatnot are all nothingness. Only when you can't get what you want will you have obsession. If you don't want anything, isn't it fine?" Arbor said, and couldn't help but laugh. It's easy to say, how can a person not want anything? Like her, no matter how much she wanted nothing else, praying for the safety of her family was also a request. Arbor said softly, "As a person, do things, and stay true to your heart. Why do you have to care so much about what the world thinks?" She didn't even realize that she had relaxed her mind in front of an old monk whom she had just met. She smiled inexplicably. It was as if the old monk was an old friend that she had not seen for a long time. In front of the old monk, she did not need to set up any defenses. The old monk looked at Arbor in a daze for a long time, and then he laughed. "Yes, but no. Good child, you are much more carefree than her, ha 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 ha." With such a joyful laugh, the two of them became less restrained and their conversation became more natural. The little monk was stupefied as he watched from the side. He had never seen his master treat anyone so cordially before. In the past, many of the guests who came to his door were like this benefactress in front of him. They were dressed in brocade and were obviously high officials and nobles. However, his master had never been polite to them. "Child, this is a remote village in the mountains. It's not easy for you to come here. Stay here for a couple of days before you leave. Thank you for your kindness, Grandmaster. However, I still have important matters to attend to, so I can't stay here any longer." "Thank you for your kind intentions, Grandmaster," Arbor hurriedly said. She had to hurry to Bailon fortification immediately. She was worried that Mo Lien would be anxious. "Since that's the case, then you must have a vegetarian meal before you leave," the old monk quickly said. Arbor nodded. Deference is no substitute for obedience. The old monk nodded with a face full of smiles. "Take a look at this graceful sword first. I will go prepare the vegetarian dishes." Chapter 728. Thank you for your trouble. Arbor nodded. After watching the great master leave, she raised her hand and touched the pitch-black box. From the outside, this box was as warm as jade, without the slightest peculiarity. However, after opening it, a strong murderous aura accompanied by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth gushed out. Only then did Arbor realize that this seemingly ordinary box was actually able to completely lock the aura of a divine weapon inside, not letting the slightest bit of it leak out. Spiritual light surged into the sky. Even though it was only for a split second, the commotion was enough to startle the surroundings. Arbor was startled and hurriedly raised her head to look. Only then did she realize that the entire sky above the meditation room had already been sealed by an aura. This layer of spiritual light simply couldn't surge out. Only then did she let out a sigh of relief and slowly sat down again. She thought to herself, so when a spiritual tool is born, a spiritual treasure's brilliance will overflow and spread in all directions. If I didn't guard against it, it would inevitably cause a commotion and the world would know. Then the spiritual tool that Mo Lien gave her before must have used some special method to seal the spiritual treasure's light. She was ignorant and inexperienced. As for the Tianji treasure map, that was because it was originally sealed by the concealed weapon box, so its divine light didn't appear in the world. However, that 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron was rather peculiar. Arbor always felt that this medicinal cauldron wasn't that simple. This thing couldn't be a mere profound weapon. The reason why it didn't have a spiritual treasure's light was probably related to the 9 stars mirroring the moon pattern on the cauldron. So far, this cauldron only had 1 star that emitted a stream of light. Arbor sat on the praying mat, holding the dagger in her hand and carefully examining it. She saw that it was snow-white and flawless, with a layer of light silver spiritual light floating on it. It was a bit longer than the palm of her hand and was quite easy to hold. Arbor gently swiped it, only to see a strand of hair in front of her was cut off at the waist. It was truly a sharp weapon that could cut through hair and cut through iron like mud. She held it in her hand and couldn't bear to part with it as she turned it over and over again. The profound energy in her hand slightly spat out, but with a whoosh, the startled swan dagger was instantly sucked into her consciousness. Her consciousness was now in a liquefied state. When he directed his spiritual sense into it, he saw a stream that looked like a jade belt slowly flowing in his conscious. Above the stream, the Spirit Division record, the Golden Talisman Jade Tome, the Tianji treasure map, the ferrule, the wooden club, the cauldron, and other items floated quietly in the air. Now that the startled swan dagger had been sucked into his consciousness, it found an empty space on its own and stayed there quietly without any strange movements. Arbor watched for a while, then a wisp of spiritual sense quietly dispersed into his consciousness. When she came back to her senses, she lowered her head and looked at the black box on her knees. She reached in with her small hand and took out the compartment of the box. Xiao Mu took out a map drawn on parchment from it. This map should be the location of the land of heritage. When she unfolded the map and glanced at it, she could not help but be stunned. She was too familiar with the place drawn on the map. She didn't even need to look at the names of the places marked on the map. She could recognize the mountain range drawn on the map at a glance. At this moment, a chubby little hand gently tugged at the corner of her clothes. Arbor came back to her senses and lowered her head to look at the little monk. She saw that the little monk's round chin was slightly tilted up. A pair of clear black and white eyes stared fixedly at her as he said in a childish voice, "Benefactress, it's time to eat." Arbor reached out to stroke his little bald head, the corners of her mouth involuntarily curling up. "Call me big sister." It was a very good meal. The old monk's skill in cooking vegetarian food was really impressive. Chapter 729. After the meal, the old monk looked at Arbor as if he wanted to say something but hesitated. Arbor spoke up, "Does Great Master have something to say to me?" The old monk sighed and said, "This old monk has a presumptuous request. All these years, this old monk has been waiting for a fated person with the startled swan dagger. Now that my wish has been fulfilled, this old monk would like to leave Shadow Moon Temple and travel to the outer planets." "You want to leave Seacone Planet?" Arbor was slightly taken aback. The old monk nodded and said with a smile, "Traveling can broaden one's horizons and broaden one's mind." Arbor's gaze landed on the chubby little monk on the side. This little monk was currently looking up at them with his round chin and his round eyes. "He's called Kong Kong. He's a very easy child to raise. You don't have to worry about him usually. Just give him 2 or 3 vegetarian buns every day." The old monk's heart was too big. He wanted to slip away and throw the little monk to her. "That's right. She did take the startled swan dagger and map that he gifted her, but he didn't say that she had to bring a child back along with her." Arbor pursed her lips. The old monk glanced at her and quickly continued, "Child, if you're unwilling to take Kong Kong with you, then leave. After that old monk goes out to travel, there will be only Kong Kong left in this empty temple. Although there shouldn't be any problems with food for 2 to 3 years, leaving such a young child alone in the temple, sigh, how can this old monk bear to do that?" Arbor rolled her eyes and muttered to herself, "If you can't bear to, then can't you take him along with you on the road? Wouldn't it be fine if you also brought him to travel around? Kong Kong is still young after all. At this age, it's not suitable for him to go out for such a long time." The old monk seemed to have seen through Arbor's thoughts and quickly said, "Don't worry, this old monk will only go out for 3 years at most. After 3 years, I'll definitely come find you and bring Kong Kong back. As for Kong Kong's safety, you don't have to worry. Although he's young, he has enough strength to protect himself." "Kong Kong!" the old monk called out. The little monk, Kong Kong, suddenly stood up shakily from the praying mat. He shook his little butt and suddenly stretched out his 10 little round fingers. 2 balls of fire were slightly jumping on these little hands. Fire spirit! Arbor was shocked. This was the first time she had seen someone other than Mo Lien who could control fire so skillfully. The 2 flames were crimson in color and looked very bright. Compared to the red flame in Mo Lien's hand, it seemed to be even purer. Of course, it couldn't compare to Mo Lien's purple flames. However, this wasn't the main point. The main point was that this little brat was only 4 years old, yet he had already comprehended spiritual fire. This is the level 7 spiritual fire that Kong Kong controls. When the old monk mentioned this, his expression could not help but turn slightly strange. When he brought Kong Kong back, Kong Kong was still a baby. It seemed that he had only been born for a few days. However, it was precisely this kind of baby that was born with spiritual fire. At first, the old monk did not notice it. After he brought this baby back, the meditation room would occasionally catch fire. Later, he realized with a start that every time the baby got angry, his little bed would catch fire. The old monk coughed lightly. "It's that. Kong Kong's ability to control fire is still not very good. Sometimes when he gets angry, it's easy for him to cough and cause the fire spirit to go berserk." Arbor's eyes widened. Then wouldn't this child be an unstable factor? How would she dare to send him home? Chapter 730. The old monk hurriedly added, don't worry. Kong Kong is a very obedient child, he usually doesn't get angry. Once he gets angry, it's like a mountain flood erupting, magma spewing out. He's usually very quiet. Prepare a meditation room for him and let him chant sutras. He doesn't come out to cause trouble. The old monk said again. Arbor looked at the old monk speechlessly. She always felt that the old monk was like a shopkeeper who didn't do anything. When he saw her, he hurriedly threw the little monk, this little burden, to her. The old monk smiled and said, Child, you definitely won't lose out by bringing Kong Kong along. You will know in the future. Although Kong Kong is still young, he has done a lot of research on Buddhist hand seals. Not only can he control the fire spirit, he can also perform various Buddhist hand seals. If you bring him along to the mystic realm, it will be of great help to you. The meaning of these words was revealed. The old monk was implying that it was useless to just rely on the map in her hands. If she wanted to enter the mystic realm, she still needed to undo the Buddhist seal. In other words, that mystic realm might have been sealed by the old monk's secret hand seals. No wonder she didn't discover it the first time she went there. The little monk staggered in front of Arbor and put his palms together to bow. Benefactress, please take care of me in the future. Arbor's mouth twitched and lightly pressed her head on the little guy's bald head. Call me sister. The little monk covered his bald head and looked at the little girl in front of him blankly. The old monk laughed a few times. After bidding farewell to the old monk, Arbor held the little monk's hand and walked out of the temple. She turned back to take a look. The old temple was still as solemn as before, but it lacked some incense and people. Benefactress, the senior brothers have all gone out to travel. Now that Master is leaving, from today onwards, there will be no one in this small temple. The little monk puffed up his chubby cheeks. Arbor stretched out 2 fingers and gently pinched the little monk's soft cheeks. She corrected him with a serious face, "Call me sister." The little monk looked at her pitifully and thought, "Benefactress is so fierce." Arbor was both amused and annoyed. She raised her hand and patted his bald head. "Call me big sister, or there will be no vegetarian buns to eat." As soon as the little monk heard that he wasn't going to be given a vegetarian bun to eat, he hurriedly and obediently called out, "Elder sister." Thus, his gluttonous nature was fully revealed. "Do you eat meat?" Arbor asked, holding his little hand. The small monk shook his bald head like a rattledrum. "This little monk doesn't eat meat. The Buddha once said that if one adheres to the precepts of cleansing oneself, one should not eat meat. This little monk is from the Shadow Moon Temple and should naturally abide by my duties, strictly." Paw! Arbor couldn't take it anymore. He raised his hand and flicked the little monk's forehead. Naggy! This little monk was so young, yet he had the potential to be a chatterbox. The little monk glanced at Arbor pitifully. "Benefactress, it's not good for you to keep hitting this little monk's head. First, the little monk will be stupid. Secondly, men and women should not touch each other." Arbor threw away the little monk's hand and ran off. "Go back to the Shadow Moon Temple. This child was so smart, he shouldn't starve to death." She had to harden her heart and throw this chatterbox away. The little monk saw that things were bad. His sugar daddy had actually run off. He hurriedly chased after her, shouting all the way, "Benefactress, wait for this little monk." Arbor was running happily in front. When she heard the little monk shout, she immediately slipped and almost fell to the ground. Chapter 731. An hour later. Arbor got onto the official road and flagged down a carriage. She gave the driver of the carriage the equivalent of half a liter of soybeans. She then carried the little bald child and sat on a carriage headed for Bailon City. There was still about 2 hours' journey from here to Bailon City, so Arbor didn't feel like carrying the little baldy. There were only 2 couples in the carriage, and one of the couples was also carrying a 4 to 5-year-old girl. When they saw the little monk get on the carriage, they sized him up curiously. "Amitba. Greetings, benefactors. This poor monk pays his respects." The little monk put his palms together and chanted a Buddhist proclamation. The people in the carriage looked at Arbor even more curiously. A half-grown young lady with a 4-year-old little monk. No matter how one looked at it, this combination was strange. Arbor twitched her mouth, and she pulled apart the little monk's clasped hands. The little monk pursed his small lips and looked pitifully at Arbor. "Benefactress, this poor monk chased you all the way just now, and now I feel hungry." A vegetarian bun stuffed the little monk's small mouth. "Eat your food. You're nagging to no end. Moreover, you're so freaking young, yet you're so scholarly," which really made people laugh. The little monk held a vegetarian bun with both hands and started nibbling on it happily. On the other hand, the little girl of the same age stared at the little monk with an impatient expression. The little monk ate halfway, but he couldn't eat any more from the little girl's stare. After thinking about it, he tilted his head, tore off a small portion of the untouched vegetarian bun, and handed it over. The couple carrying the child hurriedly thanked this compassionate little master and took the vegetarian bun to feed the little girl. Arbor didn't say much, but the couple who had fetched the vegetarian bun revealed to her that they were going to Bailon City to seek refuge with their relatives. The one driving the carriage was their old father, and the other couple in the carriage was their younger brother and sister-in-law. This family had lost many siblings during their escape, and even their old mother had passed away on the road due to catching a cold. Now, the large family of more than a dozen people was left with only a family of 6. Speaking of this, they couldn't help but sigh endlessly. However, Xiao Mu only listened attentively. At least this family had a carriage that could shelter them from the wind and rain. They could be considered to be quite well off. Many people lost their entire family during their exile. This was not an exception. The closer they got to Bailon City, the greater the flow of people, and the carriage also gradually slowed down. Her father, who was driving the carriage, shouted from outside, "Miss, the road ahead is blocked. Please wait for a moment." "Yeah, I'm fine," Arbor said faintly. She lifted a corner of the curtain and saw the passage outside. Sure enough, it was blocked by large and small carriages and people. He couldn't help but frown slightly as he thought to himself, if it really doesn't work, then I'll just sneak in through the night. That way, I won't have to stay outside the city to catch the wind. Benefactress, I want to pee. Arbor. He really wanted to send this little baldy flying with a slap. Not only was he nagging all the way, he also had all kinds of bad habits. But when she turned around to look, she saw that the child's fair and tender face was red. He looked at her pitifully, and her heart inexplicably softened a little. Pfft, the woman with the child couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Miss, how about I take this little master to relieve himself?" Without waiting for Arbor to express her opinion, the little baldy shook his head like a rattledrum. "No. I want Benefactress to take me there." Chapter 732. That woman then smiled and didn't say anything else. Arbor pulled the little baldy down the carriage and sized up the surroundings. However, she saw a sea of people congested on the path. Fortunately, there was a circle of underbrush that was half a person's height, which was just enough for the little monk to enter and relieve himself. In any case, the little monk was only 4 years old, so there was nothing to be ashamed of even if other people saw him. "Benefactress, you aren't going to sneak away, right?" The little monk parted a pile of underbrush and turned to look at her, his large, dark eyes staring straight at her. Arbor. Benefactress. Arbor gnashed her teeth. "Don't waste your breath and hurry up. I'll wait for you here." "Okay." The little monk finally relaxed and happily ran into the underbrush. Arbor shook her head speechlessly. Although she wasn't a good person, she wouldn't go so far as to deceive a little imp, right? She had said that she would bring him along on the journey, so how could she abandon him halfway? There were quite a few people coming and going, and when they passed by Arbor, their gazes couldn't help pausing on this little girl in snow-white clothes for a moment. This little girl was truly too good-looking. Arbor wasn't accustomed to being stared at, so she turned around. With a slight movement of her mystic conscience, she took out that jade messenger talisman from her inner world. There was actually a line of words that Imo Lien had left behind on the jade talisman. "Jojo, where are you right now?" Oh, crap. She had left a message for him and then left the jade messenger talisman in her inner world without checking it. Imo Lien should be worried to death, right? The little fellow lightly patted his head and hastily took out a talisman pen, hastily leaving a message on the jade messenger talisman. "I'm outside Bailon City and will enter the city soon. Don't be anxious." Just as she put down the talisman pen and put away the jade messenger talisman, she heard a shrill voice. "Mother, woo-woo-woo." She saw a ball of fiery red pounce over, and in an instant, it threw itself under her ankle, hugged her leg, and began to cry. The surrounding people were immediately petrified, and they all looked in disarray at that red-clothed little baldy who had suddenly pounced over and hugged the little girl's leg. Little Baldy's lips were red and his teeth were white, tender and cute. He looked very cute. But Arbor was shocked by this child. Where did this little brat come from? Why did he randomly grab someone and call her mother? Mother. Little Baldy slightly raised his little head, stared at the little girl, and cried, "Mother, mother, mother." Xiao Mu yanked him off her lap and tossed him to the side. There was a slight movement in the bushes. Kong Kong heard the movement and ran out. The two little Baldies looked at each other. The red-robed little Baldy suddenly pointed at Kong Kong and shouted, "Who are you? You actually pretended to be me and pestered my mother. Do you want to replace me and be mother's son?" The passers-by were stunned. At this moment, many pairs of eyes were staring at Arbor in disbelief. Fuck, this little girl herself is not young, but her son is already so old. Now, these two bald sons are even vying for favor in public. Kong Kong was baffled. He went forward and put his palms together, bowing to the red-clothed little Baldy. "This benefactor, this poor monk is a monk. Please don't speak nonsense." Afterwards, he turned back to look at the speechless Arbor. "Benefactress, is this little benefactor your son?" "I don't know him." Arbor irritably pulled down the little monk's clasped hands. "Let's go." She didn't have time to chat here. She still had to hurry into the city. Chapter 733. Mommy. Whoa whoa whoa. The red-clothed little Baldy was immediately like an abandoned puppy, whimpering as he threw himself at Arbor's feet and cried, "Mommy, Mommy, don't leave me behind." Fuck. The Snake Beauty was truly drunk. She had originally planned to disguise herself as a little monk who was sincerely devoted to Buddhism, infiltrate the hidden moon temple, and then think of a way to approach Arbor. How could she have known that plans couldn't keep up with changes? The little guy didn't stay in the hidden moon temple for long before coming out. The Snake Beauty chased after him, and a plan came to her mind. She threw herself at Arbor in front of everyone and loudly called out, "Mommy." The Snake Beauty felt that she was really going all out. At this moment, she was following Arbor with an adorable expression, crying all the way, "Mommy, don't leave me behind." Arbor's head was about to explode from his shouting, and she hated that she couldn't grab a ball of mud and directly stuff his mouth with it. At this moment, a tent flap suddenly opened. When the woman saw Arbor, she was slightly startled. It was as if she hadn't expected that she would suddenly encounter an unimaginably beautiful woman in the tent district. Afterwards, she saw a red-clothed little Baldy chasing after the cold-faced woman, repeatedly calling her Mommy. A look of disdain flashed across her face. Ha, so young, yet so ignorant of self-love. So what if she was beautiful? Mississippi, her personal maid, hurriedly ran out with a medicine chest. "Let's wrap up early today and go back to rest." The woman reached out and brushed the hair on her temples. She swept her gaze across Arbor's face, leaving a faint light in her eyes. How could a woman who only had beauty and didn't know how to love herself compare to her? She was one of the top 50 physicians in the Celestial Medicine Valley. She was a very capable woman. Of course, the capable here wasn't referring to her cultivation, but rather her exceptional medical skills. She was very confident in the medical skills of the Celestial Medicine Valley. For a top 50 physician like her, she would definitely have exceptional strength if she went out. In terms of medical skills, there weren't many who could compare to her in the entire Bailon fortifications. "Mommy." The Snake Beauty pounced and hung onto Arbor's leg. As Xiao Mu strode forward, she felt uncomfortable from head to toe with a burden on her foot. "Go away." This was ridiculous. Which family did this brat come from? Why didn't anyone come out to discipline him? "Young madam, what you're doing is wrong. Although the world is tough, children are our family's treasures. How can we just abandon them?" A middle-aged woman shook her head, her face full of disdain. Arbor was expressionless. Mother. The snake beauty secretly ground her teeth. Why was this stubborn child so hard to deal with? She was so hot and cute. Would it kill her to hug her? Arbor pulled away the snake beauty's small hand and stretched out his small foot, kicking her away with neither light nor heavy force. I'm not your mother. Fuck, where's your love? The snake beauty raised her head. When she met Arbor's cold gaze, she couldn't help but shiver. Fuck, it can't be. Did the little girl recognize her? Benefactress, this isn't right. Just as the little monk was about to speak, Arbor pinched his soft cheeks. Creak, at this moment, Balon City's city gate suddenly opened. 2 rows of soldiers with solemn expressions rushed out, rudely parting the crowd. A tall white figure appeared at the city gate. The young maidservant excitedly tugged at the miss of the celestial medicine valley. Miss, the young sir has come to pick you up. Happy New Year, everyone. Eat, drink, and have fun. See you next year, Wax. Chapter 734. A black jade belt bound the man's black hair up high. His thin lips were tightly pursed, and it was hard to tell whether he was happy or angry. His phoenix eyes were awe-inspiring without being angry. It just so happened that the sun was setting, and the sky was blanketed in red clouds. The wind was blowing and the clouds were undulating, and the chill seeped in. Mo Lien strolled out of the city gate, and he caught sight of the little fellow in a plain gown among the crowd at first glance. His eyes narrowed slightly as he stared intently at the little thing. Meanwhile, when Feng Manyun heard the maidservant's words, she hastily shifted her gaze in the direction of the city gate. With this look, her maiden heart practically flew into the air. It was him, it really was him. That graceful and elegant young master Mo. Could it be? Could it be that it was as Xiangqin said, that the young master came out this time to pick her up? Feng Manyun chuckled lightly, and her cheeks were dyed a captivating shade of red. Her elated maiden heart couldn't resist thumping, thumping, thumping faster and faster. Ever since she met this young master Mo by chance last night, Feng Manyun's proud maiden heart, which she had carefully guarded for 18 years, couldn't help but fall for this young and handsome sir. When she discovered that this young master Mo was also staying in the city lord's estate like her, she was overjoyed. Although the two of them hadn't interacted much since last night, after all, the young master was a jade-like gentleman, so he naturally abided by the rules in front of an unfamiliar young lady. But Feng Manyun felt that as long as she was given enough time to interact with him, this young noble sir would definitely develop a favorable impression of her. She was very confident about this. After all, a kind-hearted woman with exceptional medical skills like her was clearly rare in the current world. She was a doctor who had volunteered to go to the Shanty district to treat the civilians' injuries and heal the wounded. She was revered and worshipped by countless people in the Shanty district. At this time, sure enough, this graceful young master was walking in her direction. He was getting closer and closer, almost stopping right in front of her. Feng Manyun put on her most confident and beautiful smile as she took 2 small steps forward. She had just curtsied halfway when she murmured, "Young Master Mo." Prince Mo then drifted past her, not even sparing her a glance out of the corner of his eye. When Feng Manyun discovered that Prince Mo had directly dashed past her, the beautiful smile on her face instantly froze, as if it had been glued to her face. Feng Manyun's pitch-black pupils seemed to be whirling rapidly, and she only felt her neck turn abnormally stiff. Slowly, she turned her head around. Then, his pupils contracted and gradually enlarged. She saw that the noble young master, who had always been modest and arrogant in front of her, flew like a gust of wind in front of the cold and beautiful young lady. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the young master suddenly stretched out his arms and pulled the little girl into his embrace. She stuck close to his body and gently lifted her up. He even lifted the little girl's chin with one hand, lowered his head, and bit her lips gently. Such a willful way of doing things, as if there was no one around. Feng Manyun only felt like the sky had collapsed in front of her. How could this be? This was poles apart from the image of the noble young master in her mind. This young master didn't have the slightest bit of a gentleman's style right now. He was simply a living rogue. Feng Manyun's lifeless gaze was fixed on the two people, as if she had been struck by lightning. Chapter 735. Emolian. Xiao Mu was caught off guard and was bitten by him, and her eyes abruptly widened. He bit her. He bit her in front of everyone. Arbor's little face was full of vigilance. This guy couldn't be thinking of beating her up, right? Why are you here? Before Xiao Mu could finish speaking, she saw the man pick her up by the waist with a cold expression and stride toward the city gate. What are you doing? Arbor moved her little hand, but he suddenly pressed it down. Arbor keenly sensed that the man was very angry. Yes, he looked very, very angry. But why? Our dear Xiao Mu lowered her little head and racked her brains, but she couldn't figure it out. Logically speaking, she should have been very obedient and sent him a message. What reason did this guy have to be angry? Humph. Moreover, they had only not seen each other for 2 nights. It wasn't like she wanted to fall into the crevice. If there was someone to blame, it could only be the underground village chief's fault. Benefactress. When the little monk saw that his patron was actually carried away by a fierce and domineering man, how could he tolerate it? He hurriedly took small steps and ran over to their side. Benefactress, what you're doing is wrong. Hurry and let go of my benefactress. Don't act recklessly. The little monk raised his round little chin and stretched out 2 chubby little fingers, pointing forcefully at Emolian, who was much taller than him. His appearance was so adorable that the surrounding people broke out into laughter. Emolian's eyes darkened, and she muttered to the little monk, "Your benefactress." That's right. The little monk didn't know that he was about to die. He still stretched out 2 fingers and raised them towards the sky, pointing them at Emolian. Hurry and let go of my benefactress. Let this little monk tell you, karma exists in this world. We should have a clear conscience when dealing with people, and we can't force anyone. You have to know that the cycle of karma is not about to end, it's just that it's not time yet. Emolian cast an indifferent glance at him. Hui Feng coughed softly and immediately flew to the little monk like a whirlwind. Before the little monk could finish chanting, he picked him up and grabbed him in his hand. Let go, let go. The little monk shouted. There was no anger in his voice, but he still stretched out 2 fat fingers and muttered cutely, "How can you use violence and power? This method was wrong. Quickly let go. Benefactor, turn back and be saved. Don't make a single mistake that will lead to a series of mistakes. When the time comes, there will be no turning back." The corner of Huifeng's mouth twitched. Under Prince Mo's gaze, he tore off a corner of his robe and directly stuffed the little monk's mouth. Where did this little brat come from? He was so small, yet he was able to preach clearly and logically. Yes, the world was finally peaceful again. Even Arbor felt that it was a good idea to stuff the little monk's mouth. Otherwise, it would be too noisy. Mo Lien didn't say anything else and directly turned around to leave with Arbor in her arms. However, she hadn't taken a few steps when Feng Manyun, who had plucked up her courage, stopped her. Young Master Mo, Feng Manyun gave Mo Lien a standard ladylike curtsy before looking up. Her watery eyes gazed deeply at Mo Lien. Young Master Mo, you have been deceived by this woman. She isn't a young lady from a good family at all. Everyone here saw it just now. She has a son. Feng Manyun abruptly pointed at Arbor with widened eyes. She's so young, yet she's already fooling around with people everywhere. She even shamelessly had illicit sexual relations with others and gave birth to a son. Chapter 736. And what was with the son? Mo Lien simply didn't notice the snake beauty's appearance at all. That was to be expected. As a crafty person like the snake beauty, when she saw Mo Lien appear, she was very clear that she had already lost the best opportunity to stick to the little lady. She had to leave quickly. Moreover, the little lady's stern gaze just now might have actually meant that she had long seen through her identity as the snake beauty. But was that possible? This wasn't some simple disguise technique. This was a very rare special ability. She was probably the only person in the entire Seacombe planet who could shift one's appearance, alter one's bones, and distort one's meridians. This special ability to change a person's bones, appearance, and even meridians at will wasn't something that other cats or dogs could possess. Her red-clothed little Baldy's appearance was worlds apart from the Iron Walk brat from before, be it in terms of appearance or figure. If this little girl was able to recognize her at a glance, then there was really no justice in this world. Mo Lien lowered her head to glance at the little lady and saw that the little lady was currently staring at Feng Manyun. Feng Manyun felt uncomfortable all over from the little lady's gaze. The little lady's watery eyes were like two icy pools, and when she stared at someone, it made them feel very oppressed. Who did you say had a son with someone? Miss Chiao was an especially sensitive person. She could discern that the young lady before her clearly harbored a very strong enmity towards her with a single glance. Feng Manyun forcefully suppressed the anger in her heart as she gazed coldly at Arbor and said, "Could it not be? Just now, there was a bald child in red." Feng Manyun turned around, but her pupils suddenly contracted. Where was that child? Where did that damn little Baldy in red run off to? Just now, there was clearly a little Baldy in red who kept calling you Mom. Granny. Arbor suddenly called out, interrupting Feng Manyun's words. What? Feng Manyun's gaze suddenly froze as she stared at the little lady in front of her in disbelief. Although her face wasn't as rosy and exquisite as the little lady's, and she was also slightly older than the little lady, she was still a charming 18-year-old young lady in the end. If it weren't for the contrast of the little lady in front of her, Feng Manyun would also be a great beauty that everyone praised. But now, just listen to what this wretched lass called me. Granny. 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 Arbor didn't even raise his head, merely raising his eyebrows coldly. Without waiting for the infuriated Feng Manyun to retort, he continued to say with a stoic face, "Could it be that you really are my granny if I call you Granny? I'll only be 15 after the new year. That little brat looks like he's 5 or 6 years old. You've all seen it." Arbor said expressionlessly, "Do you think I could have given birth to such a big son 5 or 6 years ago?" Ha! Arbor's lips curled up in mockery as he cast Feng Manyun a disdainful glance from the corner of his eyes. You still claim to be a doctor. Isn't such a simple medical theory something that can be discerned at a glance? Doctor, ha! The two consecutive ha-s caused Feng Manyun's charming face to swell with a myriad of colors, turning it into a purplish-red hue. You! Feng Manyun was rendered speechless by Arbor's rebuke. She wanted to say something, but she was tongue-tied and couldn't retort. You scolded me very viciously just now. Apologize to me immediately. Otherwise, I'll make sure that you won't be able to utter another word from now on, Arbor said apathetically. The relatives at home hadn't left yet. Speaking of which, your family is also kicking up a fuss, right? Ha ha ha. Chapter 737. In reality, ever since her rebirth, Arbor had been consciously or unconsciously recuperating her body. Her period started around the age of 13 in her previous life, so it was indeed late in this life. However, she had checked her pulse before, and her body was much better than in her previous life, so she wasn't too worried. According to her calculations, it should be within the next 2 months. That was why Feng Manyun's insults towards her just now were truly extremely laughable. Feng Manyun's face flushed red from embarrassment, and she stammered, You. This damn lass actually wanted her to apologize to her in public. Impossible. Feng Manyun's face flushed so red that it was about to flush blood. Just now was merely a misunderstanding. I misunderstood Mississippi. Feng Manyun's lips trembled, and she couldn't resist speaking softly. What misunderstanding? Could it be that you're this kind of person? That you go around fooling around and casually having a son with someone else? Arbor coldly interrupted her, throwing Feng Manyun's previous words back at her. After all, if your body is dirty, everyone you look at is dirty. From the looks of it, you've given birth to more than one, right? Everyone. This little lady's mouth was truly venomous. Others said that she had given birth to a son, yet she wanted to accuse others of giving birth to several sons. Look at how physician Feng was so infuriated that her face flushed red, and tears streamed down her cheeks. She really was pitiful. Arbor scoffed and turned his small face away, no longer looking at Feng Manyun. They simply weren't on the same level of fighting strength, so he didn't want to waste his breath on her. You're already shedding tears after saying a few words. What use are tears? Can they be eaten or drunk? Young Master Mo, this miss is babbling nonsense. Don't listen to her. Before Feng Manyun could finish speaking while wiping her tears, Mo Lian directly strode past her with Arbor in her arms, not even sparing her a glance out of the corner of her eye. Feng Manyun's entire body stiffened. He actually didn't even want to waste time listening to her explanation. It turned out that this humble noble young master only showed his rascal side in front of that little girl. He completely turned a blind eye to everyone else. It wasn't that young master who maintained the etiquette of a gentleman and maintained his poise and distance from unfamiliar girls. Instead, this young master simply couldn't be bothered to pay attention to a strange girl. His coldness that kept people 1,000 miles away came from the depths of his bones. Arrogance, indifference, and gentlemanly manners, these were the views of this noble young master in the eyes of the other ladies. In fact, he wasn't even that kind of person. She hasn't apologized to me. Arbor angrily pulled Mo Lian's hair. From the beginning until now, Mo Lian hadn't spoken to her. The little girl was unhappy. In front of Prince Mo, darling Qiao had always been like a little emperor. When Mo Lian ignored her, she was a little angry. Apologize. Mo Lian abruptly turned around, and he abruptly glared at Feng Manyun with a bone-chilling severity. Feng Manyun's entire heart started trembling fiercely. This was the first time Prince Mo had spoken to Feng Manyun since they met yesterday. Yet these 2 words made Miss Feng feel as if she had fallen into an ice cave. Feng Manyun's body started trembling involuntarily. She stubbornly pressed her tongue against her teeth, unwilling to utter a single word. Bang! An intense pressure forced her knees to give way, and she abruptly knelt on the ground. Chapter 738. Ah! Feng Manyun only felt that pressure crushing her from head to toe, and her bones were about to shatter. How could she resist it? Saliva and snot flowed out of her nose and mouth. She only felt that she was battered and exhausted in front of everyone, and her image as a fairy physician from Celestial Medicine Valley didn't exist at all. No! How could she kneel in front of that girl in such a lowly and contemptible manner? Her neck was nearly crushed, and she heavily knocked her head against the ground, unable to lift it up at all. He actually treated her like this. Intense hatred welled up in Feng Manyun's heart. At this moment, the tender feelings of a young girl that filled her heart all transformed into bone-deep hatred. Hate, hate, hate. Hate. This icily arrogant and heartless man actually trampled on her, Feng Manyun's, feelings like this. Right now, she couldn't tell if she was feeling regret or resentment, or perhaps it was even more hatred. If she didn't take revenge, she wasn't a gentleman. She would definitely avenge this grudge. Arbor tugged at Mo Lian's sleeve and puffed up her cheeks. She just didn't like that woman scolding her like this and wanted that woman to apologize for her tongue. She wouldn't go so far as to insist on killing her over a few words. Her original intention was only to have Feng Manyun apologize. Shouldn't she apologize for using malicious and untrue words to scold someone in front of them? She kept feeling that this man had nowhere to vent his anger and just so happened to bump into the unlucky Feng Manyun herself. Speaking of which, although Prince Mo always looked gentle and amiable, giving off a refreshing feeling, he was actually more ruthless and decisive than anyone else in the world. Mo Lian pressed her lips tightly together, and her face was as cold as snow. Her pair of phoenix eyes were dyed with ruthlessness, and she raised her hand apathetically. Your Highness. Your Highness. Bailon City's city lord, Lin Yongyi, who had rushed over after hearing the news, hastily stepped forward and knelt on one knee in salute. Your Highness, please quell your anger. Your Highness, please show mercy. Lin Yongyi's eyes contracted slightly. As a leveled, 13 mystic cultivator, City Lord Lin could see more clearly than anyone else present that His Highness's move clearly carried killing intent. His Highness wanted to execute this Miss Feng on the spot. What should they do? Miss Feng came from the Celestial Medical Valley. Even if he didn't give face to the monk, he still had to give face to the Buddha. The Celestial Medicine Valley had always lived in seclusion and never asked about worldly affairs. The people in the Celestial Medicine Valley would often come out to travel around and treat people. They had indeed treated many people who were on the verge of death and saved many people's lives. It was definitely an excellent sect that was praised by tens of thousands of people and praised by everyone. If His Highness rashly killed a doctor from the Celestial Medicine Valley, not to mention whether he would become enemies with the Celestial Medicine Valley, even if it was for the sake of his reputation, he absolutely couldn't do it on the surface. His capricious Highness really made all the officials worry about him. Your Highness, Your Highness. Miss Feng made a mistake and should naturally be handed over to the people of the Celestial Medicine Valley to deal with. Your Highness, please. Slowly withdrawing the pressure all over her body, Mo Lian coldly glanced at City Lord Lin, turned around, picked up the little fellow, and floated away. Woo woo. Ugh. The little monk kicked his two little legs and angrily glared at Huifeng, who was carrying him. With a tap of his foot, Huifeng picked up the little monk and swiftly followed after the crown prince and his wife. Ha, ha. Cough cough, ha. Feng Manyun's entire body went limp, and she sprawled on the ground like a dead dog, shuddering all over. The maidservant Xiangqin hastily helped her up with tears in her eyes. Chapter 739. However, she was small and weak, so even after supporting her twice, she only made Feng Manyun half kneel on the ground limply, unable to get up even after a long time. Mississippi Xiangqin wiped her tears and called out pitifully. City Lord Lin gave the two maidservants on his left a look, and those two hastily ran up to help Feng Manyun up. At this time, Feng Manyun was already in an extremely sorry state. Her dress was covered in sand and mud, and her face was also extremely filthy from snot and tears. City Lord Lin sighed. Miss Feng, let's have someone send you back to rest first. This Miss Feng just had to provoke the willful His Highness the Crown Prince out of all people. Such poor eyesight. How could he endure this? After Feng Manyun was helped up, she kept silent the entire time. Her eyes merely emitted a chilly glint, and the corners of her mouth were tightly upturned. "Miss, let's go." Xiangqin forcefully wiped her tears in indignation. "This place is too much of a bully. Let's return to Celestial Medicine Valley and never come here again." City Lord Lin waved his hand at those two maidservants, and those two quickly helped support Feng Manyun to the carriage parked on the side. It wasn't until they got on the carriage and lowered the curtain that Feng Manyun's bone-deep trembling finally stopped slightly. Just now, those people outside were all looking at her with disdain and schadenfreude. These people. Just how dark and terrifying were their hearts. If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have saved them. Why would she be a healer who saved the dying and healed the injured? She saved people in order to enjoy everyone's respectful attitude and loving gazes. She wanted everyone to know that she, Feng Manyun, was an incredible physician who could pull a dying person back from the gates of hell with a single silver needle. Yet at this moment, not only did she not receive heartfelt respect and adoration, she even completely lost face in front of a crowd of commoners, making them see her, great physician Feng, as a joke. She wanted to kill them. She wanted to kill these people who dared to mock her. Feng Manyun's body convulsed and spasmed from time to time, and her limbs trembled uncoordinated. After the carriage left, everyone sighed and gathered together to whisper, "Dr. Feng has been wrong this time. We have to think of a way to visit her in the city lord's mansion. That young master just now was so powerful. When he was angry, I didn't even dare to make a sound. Dr. Feng is really pitiful. Encountering such a powerful young master, we can't help at all." But just now, Dr. Feng, she spoke without thinking and insulted a young lady. She was an innocent young lady, and her reputation was almost ruined by her. This isn't too good. Sigh, maybe it was a misunderstanding. Dr. Feng didn't do it on purpose. The crowd dispersed as they chatted. They didn't know that the Dr. Feng they spoke of had a twisted mind. Now, she wished she could kill all of these people who had seen her in such a sorry state. Crown Prince Mo wordlessly carried Darling Qiao back to the city lord's estate and headed for his residence inside the city lord's estate. The little emperor baby was unhappy. "Why aren't you talking?" Arbor angrily moved his little hands and feet. Stinky Mo Lien, he didn't say a single word to her the entire way. This darling also doesn't want to talk to him. Mo Lien was like a saw-toothed gourd as he carried Darling Qiao all the way back to the dormitory. Once he stepped through the door, he kicked it shut with a bang. "See you on the second day of the new year, my head hurts so much." Chapter 740. You. Qiao Mu had only spat out one word when Mo Lien pushed her down onto the bed. The man then thoroughly sealed the second half of her sentence in her small mouth. The man's kiss came like a storm, a sudden burst of thunder. In an instant, Arbor's breath was taken away. The man's hot breath hit her in the face. It was different from the light kisses in the past. This kiss was gentle, elegant, reserved, and warm. Today's kiss was simply crazy. In an instant, he pounced on her and pressed his lips tightly against hers, grinding and tossing, not giving her a chance to escape again. Qiao Mu grunted and secretly tried to break free, but she only felt that the man's arms were scorching hot and shockingly strong. How could her soft and small body break free from his grip? She only felt that her heart was beating violently, as if it was going to jump out of her chest. Thump, thump, thump. What should she do? This evildoer in front of her was too eye-catching. Even when he was angry and pounced on her, he was still so seductive. In front of such beauty, one would lose the ability to think. Mo Lien, I. Arbor's breathing was a little rapid, and her heart was in a mess. The man answered in a deep voice and slowly lifted his face. His eyes were slightly upturned, and his handsome face was slightly red as he looked at her from a few inches away. When she struggled to sit up, she saw the evildoer on top of her leaning over. His water-like black hair fell down and fell on her little face. His hair brushed against her neck, tickling her face. The man opened his mouth slightly and spat a mouthful of medicine into her little mouth. Arbor was speechless. "Do you still remember what I said before?" The man pressed his lips against hers and rubbed gently. "If you disappear without a word again, I will tie you to my side, never allow you to leave my side again." "I didn't disappear." Arbor widened her round eyes angrily. Now, other than her head and mouth, she couldn't move her body and limbs. She was so angry. "It disappeared." Mo Lien spoke faintly as he bit her small mouth neither lightly nor heavily. "It was the night before yesterday. Your aura disappeared in an instant." Arbor suddenly fell silent. "The night before yesterday, that was when she went to Paradise Planet to stay the night." The man turned his head slightly, one hand supporting his head while the other caressed her little face. He murmured softly, "I don't like the feeling of you disappearing. It's as if everything in the world has turned into nothing." It was as if he had turned into ashes in an instant. Mo Lien's slender fingers caressed her tender cheeks inch by inch as he gazed at her with a slightly dazed gaze. "My heart feels empty, as if someone dug out a large piece of it. It's so unbearable." That kind of feeling, even if he wanted to cry, he couldn't shout. It was as if the heavens and earth had turned into nothingness for a moment. He desperately tried to grab hold of something, but in the end, he couldn't grab hold of anything. His face drooped down, suddenly burying it in Qiao Mu's hair, and his breathing also turned more oppressive. "Jojo, what do you want me to do?" "Don't disappear, don't leave me, don't ever leave me, okay," he said softly, his head slowly rubbing against her hair twice. Qiao Mu's heart melted because of this man. Chapter 741. This man looked noble and proper on the surface, but he was so good at whispering sweet nothings in secret. It was so soft that she couldn't help blushing and her heart beating faster. Arbor's lips were numb and soft. Her little face was red and her little mouth couldn't help but open slightly. She was like a beautiful little flower, waiting to be gently plucked. The two of them kissed each other with their lips and teeth, as if they were going to fuse together. They kissed for a while. The temperature in the room rose quite a bit. Arbor suddenly realized that her little hands and feet could move. She couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. She gently raised her hand and touched the man's furry head. "Mo Lien." Arbor called out softly. The man raised his head slightly. His gaze was so deep that it was as if he could see through her. His gaze was so deep that it almost sucked her into the abyss. "Baby." He gently rubbed his lips on her little face and reached out to hold her face. He looked straight into her eyes. "Have me in your eyes, okay?" He was most afraid that he wouldn't be able to imprint his figure in those beautiful eyes. He wanted her eyes to have him, to have his reflection, to have his existence. Even if at this moment, this baby's heart might not be like his, loving so intensely and deeply that he couldn't extricate himself. It didn't matter. He had the patience to integrate into her life bit by bit. Like the spring wind and rain, he seeped into her world and her life. He firmly grasped her heart and took it for himself. He wouldn't let her escape even half an inch. Arbor gave a muffled mm. She subconsciously reached out and secretly touched her heart. What was going on? Her heart kept pounding non-stop. It was beating so fast that she was in a mess. She kept feeling that the current her didn't seem like herself anymore. I'm sleepy. Xiao Mu abruptly pulled over the bedding beside her and covered her head with it, blocking his scorching gaze. His gaze was too burning. It burned her whole body and made her cheeks unbearably hot. The little fellow wrapped herself up like a little cicada pupa. Her neck and head were all buried in the blanket. It wasn't until Mo Lien tugged lightly that he dug her small head out from the thick blankets. Why are you wrapped so tightly? Mo Lien sighed softly and stuffed her two small hands into the blankets. He pulled the blankets up to her neck and leaned over to plant a kiss on her forehead. Go to sleep. Just as he got up half an inch, a soft hissing sound came from his mouth. It turned out that a strand of her hair had been caught by the button on her clothes. Arbor lowered his head. His little fingers moved slightly as he silently untied the strand of hair. When he raised his head, his eyes met with the boy's watery eyes. Jojo. He called out to her in a low voice. His eyes were filled with love, as if he wanted to melt her whole body. Arbor felt his heart skip a beat. He cried out in alarm and pulled the blanket up like an ostrich, covering his head with it. Mo Lien giggled and hugged the blanket wrapped around the doll. Her mood was lifted. It seemed like his little fellow still had feelings for him. Looking at her shy little face, it really melted his heart. He reached out and pulled her little head out from under the blankets. Then, he lifted her blankets and shamelessly laid down. He reached out and hugged her tightly. All right, it's late. Let's sleep. Mo Lien said as he rubbed against her soft little body. It's freezing outside. Chapter 742. Xiao Mu's eyes abruptly turned round. This guy wasn't going to leave today. Him. Was this guy acting coquettishly with her just now? Arbor's little hand naturally reached over and patted Mo Lien's head. Then she rolled onto the bed, as if she wanted to wrap herself into a cocoon again. Mo Lien realized that this little fellow's sleeping habit seemed to be that she liked to wrap herself into a cocoon. He reached out and pulled her to his side. He hugged her and patted her. You're cold. Arbor blinked and lifted her head from his embrace. Time to sleep. Time to sleep. Mo Lien hugged her and rubbed her little hand. Are you cold? No. Now that there was another person beside her, it wasn't good for her to continue wrapping herself in the blanket. Moreover, Mo Lien's body was pressed against hers. It felt like there was a small stove beside her. Mo Lien's body was so warm. He was a man, so his body temperature was higher than hers. Moreover, he cultivated the fire spirit, so he was naturally like a little sun, emitting warmth all over. With this person pressed against her, she was enveloped in a unique masculine scent. How could she fall asleep? Instead, she felt more and more awake. I can't sleep. Mo Lien was still talking to her. He patted her back gently. Do you want to get up and eat something? Eating a midnight snack? Xiao Mu asked and even rubbed her small belly. It seemed a little flat, but supper was not bad. Mo Lien's eyebrows twitched. Suddenly, there was a sound from the window. A voice rang out softly from outside. Master, supper is here. Do you have any orders? Arbor was speechless. Why did their master always come up with such ridiculous names? Mo Lien coughed lightly. If there's nothing else, you can leave. Oh. Student Xiao Yi scratched his head and hid his figure in confusion. Mo Lien chuckled. Our subordinate is very honest. Arbor curled his lip speechlessly. Let them all rest. It was already so late at night. What could possibly be happening? Furthermore, he was standing guard by the window, popping his head out from time to time. It was really creepy. All right. Mo Lien didn't say much. She carried the little fellow and sat down by the bed. She ordered the servants to prepare some food. Not long after, a box of piping hot pastries and 2 bowls of wontons was brought in. After eating 5 to 6 small wontons, Xiaomu couldn't eat anymore, so she pushed the rest to Mo Lien. Meanwhile, she picked up a small piece of glutinous rice cake and nibbled on it. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to follow Lin Yongyi to see the field that can grow crops. Mo Lien stretched out her finger and wiped away the pastry crumbs on the little fellow's lips. Do you want to go together? Arbor thought for a moment before shaking his head. He took out a level 11 mystic breakthrough pill from his bag. I'll take this tomorrow and enter closed-door cultivation to advance first, okay? She had long wanted to take this level 11 mystic breakthrough pill, but it had been delayed until now by a bunch of things. Yes, she wanted to quickly break through to level 12 mystic cultivation so that the sapling could drag Mo Lien into Paradise Planet to take a look. Okay. Mo Lien naturally nodded. Then you advance well. I'll go alone. I might come back late. If you come out of seclusion early, you can eat by yourself first. Arbor nodded. I might take quite a long time. It was only 10:30 p.m. when the banquet ended. Chapter 743. Okay. Mo Lien naturally understood that the more stable one's cultivation was when they wanted to advance, the longer it would take to advance. I'll wait for you, there's no hurry. Advance well, you must not be distracted. After eating supper, the two of them wandered around the room twice to digest their food. Seeing that the little fellow was sleepy, Mo Lien carried her to rinse her mouth, wipe her face, and fall asleep on the bed. Early the next morning, Arbor opened her sleepy eyes and subconsciously reached out to touch the bed. The bed beside her was already cold. Presumably, Mo Lien really went to the fields early in the morning before dawn to look at the crops. The little fellow was a little listless. She got up to wash up and casually ate some breakfast. Then, she ordered people not to disturb her and closed the door by herself. A level 11 mystic breakthrough pill appeared at her fingertips. Arbor lowered her head to take a look. With a wave of her finger, 60 blue guiding talismans appeared around her, forming a circle. Then, another 60 binding talismans were thrown out, setting up a binding talisman array around her. Following several ping-pang sounds, the doors and windows were all sealed by the mystic energy restriction she set up. This manually created a sealed cultivation room. After Xiaomu swallowed that level 11 mystic breakthrough pill, it instantly attracted mystic energy from all directions, which all flocked toward this cultivation room in unison. The level 11 mystic breakthrough pill was indeed extraordinary. Especially this purple-veined pill of hers, its effect was very good. After taking it for a short while, it began to show its effects. She calmed her heart and closed her eyes to break through. On the other side, Mo Lien was led by Lin Yongyi to a field to check it out. This field was not even 10 mu of land, and it was planted with a field of earthy yellow crops. This crop seems to have never been seen before. Is it a newly cultivated variety? Mo Lien was talking to Lin Yongyi in a low voice. Lin Yongyi nodded repeatedly, Your Highness, after this yellow stalk is harvested and ground into powder, it's somewhat similar to wheat flour. It's a crop that we've researched with great difficulty recently. The most gratifying thing is that this crop will not mutate when it grows. How long is the growth period of this crop? Lin Yongyi hesitated for a moment, then sighed and said, I won't hide it from Your Highness. This kind of yellow shaft takes too long to grow. It needs 1.5 years to harvest. But rest assured, Your Highness, we are also working hard to shorten its growth cycle. Mo Lien nodded with a heavy expression. A harvest period of 1.5 years was a little too long. If there was enough food to sustain the lives of the common people, then their lives would get better and better. City Lord, City Lord. As they were speaking, a dark-skinned steward from the City Lord's estate hurriedly ran over with sweat all over his forehead. He hurriedly greeted Mo Lien and the City Lord. Greetings to your Highness the Crown Prince and the City Lord. Old son, if you have something to say, say it quickly. The City Lord saw his anxious expression and his heart couldn't help but tighten a little. City Lord, that apothecary Hong suddenly decided to quit. Old son was burning with anxiety and couldn't help but curse loudly. That son of a bitch, how could he do this? He's too inconsiderate. The City Lord had given him such preferential treatment and had even sent someone to serve him with food and drink. How could he quit just like that? What? Lin Yongyi was greatly shocked. Chapter 744. Apothecary Hong is quitting. But he's the main researcher on the Yellow Shaft's accelerated growth period. How could he? Did he say why he's quitting? That son of a bitch, he didn't say anything. Old man's son was so angry that he stomped his feet and scolded. He threw away his tools just now and even dragged a few of the commissioners with him. Then hurry up and stop him. Lin Yongyi also jumped up anxiously. The research on the Yellow Shaft's harvest hadn't been completed yet, so how could Apothecary Hong just leave like that? These days, thanks to Apothecary Hong's special cultivation of the Yellow Shaft with special herbs, they would be able to harvest in 2 or 3 months. How could he just leave like that? Old man's son hurriedly shouted, I've already sent people to stop them. They should be at the gate of the courtyard now. Then let's hurry over and take a look. The City Lord hurriedly turned and bowed to Prince Mo, Your Highness, this humble subject has been impolite. There are some urgent matters here that need to be dealt with immediately. Prince Mo nodded. I'll go with you to take a look. Yes, yes. City Lord Lin hurriedly nodded and hurried to the gate with Old Man Sunday. This piece of land was behind a farmhouse. Ever since this piece of land was able to grow crops like the yellow stalk, it had been growing for a long time. The ecstatic City Lord Lin was worried that some ignorant commoners would run in and trample the farmland, so he had already set up guards outside the courtyard. Therefore, when Apothecary Hong and the others wanted to go out, the soldiers who received the order would definitely stop them. At this time, Hong Yaowei was holding his nose to the sky and crossing his arms. He coldly looked disdainfully at the soldiers blocking their way. All of you, get out of my way. Apologies, Apothecary Hong. The City Lord has ordered you to wait for a moment. The soldiers guarding the farmhouse's courtyard said to him in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. This Hong Yaowei's character really wasn't very good. Usually, because he was one of the most important commissioners who mainly studied the Yellow Shaft's growth period, the City Lord and the others were very courteous to him and were in fear and trepidation. This Hong Yaowei was a bit arrogant. Wherever he went, he looked down on people, causing the farmhouse's soldiers and servants to look down on him. However, due to the City Lord's order, he had no choice but to be courteous to Hong Yaowei. When the mayor and Prince Mo arrived at the entrance of the farmhouse, they saw Hong Yaowei angrily scolding the guards. The City Lord hurriedly ran forward and comforted him with an apologetic smile. Alchemist Hong, please calm down. I wonder what the servants have done to displease Alchemist Hong. Why did Alchemist Hong suddenly propose to leave this place? Hong Yaowei snorted coldly. City Lord Lin, everyone knows what you've done. Don't play dumb with me. City Lord Lin was confused. He really didn't understand how he had offended this Apothecary Hong. Apothecary Hong, I really don't know what made Apothecary Hong unhappy. Why don't Apothecary Hong tell me? Hong Yaowei burst into laughter. How could you forget what you did to my junior sister at the city gate last night after only one night? Junior sister. Lin Yongyi's heart skipped a beat. In an instant, it was as clear as a mirror. That's right, this Hong Yawei was also an apothecary who had walked out of Celestial Medicine Valley. Moreover, he was Feng Manyun's senior and junior sister. Feng Manyun's matter must have agitated this Lord Hong. Chapter 745. Hong Yawei's heart ached for his good junior sister, and in a fit of rage, he abandoned his job and came to avenge her. Apothecary Hong, Apothecary Hong. City Lord Lin persuaded this Lord Hong with a distressed expression, please quell your anger. You really can't just quit on the matter of the yellow shaft. Mo Lien, who was standing silently on the side, had long understood the sequence of events, and she couldn't help but sneer at that Apothecary Hong. City Lord Lin's heart immediately sank along with Prince Mo's sneer. Who in the imperial court hadn't heard of His Highness the Crown Prince's various willful deeds? This was a lord who did as he pleased. City Lord Lin cursed Hong Yawei inside out, but on the surface, he still had to smile. Apothecary Hong, how about you reconsider? We have already signed an agreement. You have to help me cultivate the yellow stem and shorten its growth period. If we were to take out the agreement to do things, wouldn't that be a bit unsightly? You dare to threaten me? Hong Yawei rolled up his sleeves, looking like he was about to immediately pick a fight with City Lord Lin. Do you know who I am? I am a member of the Hong family. A member of the capital's Hong family. Hong Yawei shouted coldly. Not only that, but I am also a member of the Celestial Medicine Valley. Hong Yawei said angrily, you actually dare to treat a member of the Celestial Medicine Valley like this? Aren't you afraid of being drowned by the saliva of everyone in the world? My junior sister came to your Bailon city as a traveling doctor out of the goodness of her heart. She didn't collect any treatment fees, only the fee for medicinal materials. She saved so many of your people. Hong Yawei became more and more spirited as he spoke, berating repeatedly, what about you? You people, not only don't you respect her, you even crushed her face into the ground in public. I'm telling you, Lin Yongyi. Today, I'm leaving for sure. Not only am I leaving. These people are also leaving with me. Let's go. Miss Fang's diehard fans clenched their fists as they berated loudly. After hearing Hong Yawei talk about Miss Feng, each and every one of them cried injustice for her, and their hearts ached terribly. Miss Feng was such a fairy-like person, how could someone be so ruthless to her? As soon as Hong Yawei said that he was going to quit, several of Miss Feng's diehard fans responded at the same time. They immediately threw down their hoes and seeds and followed Hong Yawei to leave. Humph, what a joke. Did they think that Bailon City's treatment was very good? For people like them, who were able to research and grow a crop like yellow stock, they would be able to make a living wherever they went. He could even negotiate with the city lords of other cities. Maybe he could get better treatment. Prince Mo narrowed his eyes and sneered, men. Surround him. Fight. Hit him hard. As soon as he finished speaking, almost 20 young men in black swarmed over from all directions like phantoms. Holding heavy sticks in their hands, they surrounded Hong Yawei and the 7 commissioners who came with him and pressed their sticks forward without saying a word. Grabbing their arms, they waved their sticks brutally and hit them hard. Bang! 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 On the side, City Lord Lin was hopping about as he watched, and his eyelids rolled back repeatedly. He could only murmur in persuasion, Your Highness, Your Highness. Go fetch that agreement you were talking about. Mo Lien harumphed angrily, shooting a severe gaze at Lin Yongyi. Is this how you indulge these people? No wonder there hasn't been any progress or efficiency after so long. Lin Yongyi's heart thumped heavily, and he only felt that his bad luck was pressing down on him. End of 6 p.m. See you tomorrow. Chapter 746. Preposterous. Hong Yaowei panted heavily as he cursed with a flushed face. At this moment, his arms were lifted up with wooden sticks and he was being beaten by several black-clothed youths. His back was bruised by the sticks, and it hurt and itched, making him anxious and angry. "You, who are you?" Hong Yaowei shouted angrily. He felt that these people were fierce and unreasonable. He didn't want to admit defeat so quickly, but unfortunately, he was weak and had no choice but to lower his head under the eaves. Hong Yaowei, together with the other 7 commissioners, was forced to kneel on the ground. No matter how they roared, their arrogance was greatly diminished after the collision of the sticks. The crowd parted slightly to the sides, making a path for the crown prince to pass through. Prince Mo coldly reached out and took the agreement that old man's son respectfully presented. He only glanced at it briefly before throwing it heavily at Hong Yaowei's face. He sneered and said, "Within 10 days, I want to see significant results in this farmland. Otherwise, there's no use for you to keep it. Not only do I want you to die, I also want to execute your entire family and punish you for the crime of deceiving the monarch. All of you, take care of yourselves." Mo Lian's phoenix eyes narrowed as he coldly threw down these words. He turned around and gently raised his hand. The youths of the Hidden Night Pavilion respectfully bowed to receive the order. "Watch them. Today is also counted as one of the 10 days. Whoever dares to incite rebellion will be killed." Prince Mo coldly glanced back. In an instant, everyone in the farmhouse held their breaths, not daring to say another word. Lin Yongyi slightly lowered his head and cupped his hands in salute, not daring to raise his head. Prince Mo's cold gaze shifted to City Lord Lin as he said indifferently, "You, come here." "Yes." Lin Yongyi's heart skipped a beat. His head was still lowered as he quickly moved to keep up with Prince Mo's pace. Seeing that terrifying man leave, Hong Yaowei was about to open his mouth and shout when a commissioner beside him couldn't help but curse, "What are you doing? You people! How dare you treat us like this? How dare you use this method to force us to study the cultivation of the yellow stalk? We will not yield." A silver light flashed across that man's neck. In the next second, a round head fell off from that guy's neck and rolled on the ground before landing beside Hong Yaowei's feet. "Ah!" Hong Yaowei collapsed to the ground in fear. He screamed in a hoarse voice and kicked his legs, trying to move his butt backward. Xiao Yi raised his hand and stopped the young man who was about to make a move. He said coldly, "By His Highness' order, anyone who disagrees will be executed without mercy." Hong Yaowei and the remaining 6 commissioners became obedient. They trembled like quails and shrank into a corner, looking at the dozen young men of the Hidden Night Pavilion in fear. On the other side, when they arrived at the city lord's estate study, Mo Lian wordlessly sat down on the seat of honor. Huifeng's hands were clasped behind his back as he stood upright behind the crown prince. Lin Yongyi hastily knelt in front of the desk and buried his head, smiling wryly on the inside. It was a pity that he, a man in his 40s, was so intimidated by a young man in his early 20s that he didn't even dare to breathe loudly. It could be seen that the crown prince was so powerful that ordinary people didn't dare to look him in the eye. "Hand over your city lord's token," Mo Lian said coldly. Chapter 747. Lin Yongyi shuddered all over. He hastily reached into his pocket and took out the city lord token, respectfully holding it above his head. "City lord." Old man's son knelt behind City Lord Lin. He was about to speak when City Lord Lin glared at him. Huifeng flashed in front of Lin Yongyi and took the City Lord token before returning to the desk. After gently placing the city lord token in front of the crown prince, Huifeng silently returned to stand behind the crown prince. Lin Yongyi. This humble subject is here. We know. You are a benevolent and righteous good city lord. All these years, Bailon's fortifications have been well managed by you, and the people have been living and working in peace and contentment. For this reason, the great king's heart is also greatly comforted. Your Highness praises me too much. The great king favors me greatly. Lin Yongyi lowered his head and said softly, these are all things that should be done as a subject. You should also be credited with the discovery of the yellow pole. If this crop can be mass-produced in the future, it can supply most people's food supplies. You absolutely cannot go unnoticed. Mo Lian pointed at him as he stared at the kneeling Lin Yongyi in front of him, his icy voice softening slightly. This humble subject dares not claim credit. Lin Yongyi hurriedly prostrated himself on the ground. Mo Lian waved her hand at him. It's your credit, so it's naturally yours. No need to be so modest with us. It's not good to be overly modest. We like people who speak the truth. Yes, yes, yes. Sweat was about to seep out of Lin Yongyi's forehead. However, the fact that Hong Yaowei dared to rebel today is also related to your usual indulgence. Mo Lian's expression turned solemn again as he picked up the city lord token that Lin Yongyi had presented to him. What we want is someone who can do practical things for the country and the people. We don't care whether Hong Yaowei is from the Hong family or whether he has some celestial medicine valley backing him. If this person is disobedient, you can punish him accordingly and not blindly indulge him. This resulted in today's consequences. Mo Lian paused. Holding City Lord Lin's City Lord token, she leaned forward slightly and said coldly, this solitude wants you to know. Behind you, Lin Yongyi, are this Gu, the great king, the entire great Mo kingdom, tens of thousands of mystic cultivator troops, and millions of brave soldiers as your backing. You, Lin Yongyi, aren't weaker than anyone else. I don't need you to be a yes man. Mo Lian's fingertips lightly tapped the desk surface as she icily said, you can tell Hong Yaowei, or anyone else, that if they don't succeed today, and if they don't do it beautifully enough, they can forget about leaving Bailon City. Because you are Bailon City's lord. Under the great king and under this solitude, Bailon City is under your command. What Celestial Medical Valley or Hong Clan? If they are not convinced, they can come and find me. Do you understand? Lin Yongyi and Old Man Sun abruptly looked up, spellbound as they gazed at this Crown Prince Mo, who was leaning forward to gaze at them. He only felt that the young man's body seemed to be radiating with boundless radiance, extremely dazzling. Yes. Lin Yongyi heavily kowtowed to the ground. He couldn't help but feel the blood in his heart boil, and his voice contained a trace of agitation as he said, this lowly official was foolish and ignorant, this lowly official was incompetent. Will your highness please punish me? Mo Lian lightly tossed that city lord token into Lin Yongyi's hands. Get up. For the time being, I will remember your merits and demerits. Properly supervise that batch of people. Within 10 days, we want to see results. These aren't empty words. This lowly official will solemnly obey your highness's verbal instructions. Lin Yongyi nodded heavily. Chapter 748. Miss. It's bad. Xiangqin tossed aside the kettle in her hand and stumbled inside. Feng Manyun, who was currently concocting some medicine on the table while wrapping herself in a quilt, abruptly raised her head, and her limbs convulsed in an uncoordinated manner. Miss. Xiangqin ran up and hastily helped tidy up the medicine on the table. Miss, when I passed by the kitchen just now, I overheard the other maidservant saying that the city lord has already ordered us to be evicted from the city lord's estate and sent to live on a farm. It's the farm that your senior brother Hong is at. Feng Manyun's pupils contracted, and her limbs convulsed uncontrollably again. She shrieked uncontrollably, Lin Yongyi actually dared to treat us like this. I am Celestial Medicine Valley's top 50 physician Feng. He actually dared. He actually dared. Feng Manyun was so infuriated that she nearly shattered her silver teeth from clenching them. Her entire body convulsed in the quilt, and she looked almost a bit neurotic. Miss, I heard that senior brother Hong failed to cause a ruckus with his people this morning, and City Lord Lin has also restrained him. Miss, what should we do? Xiangqin was a bit scared. The young miss and her were just ordinary people who did not have the strength to truss a chicken. The city lord only needed to send a few strong and powerful soldiers to throw the two of them out of the manor. Xiangqin was a bit regretful now that she couldn't stop Miss from sending a message to senior brother Hong. Originally, they could at least recuperate peacefully in the city lord's estate for a while. But now, with Miss in this state, how were they going to survive after being chased to a farm? Move aside, all of you move aside. A bang came from outside the door. The door to the room was rudely kicked open, and several burly soldiers from the city lord's estate strode inside. Amidst the master and servant pair's uncontrollable screams, they were dragged out of the room. Feng Manyun wrapped herself tightly in a quilt, completely wrapping herself inside. She kicked the soldiers in front of her in a panic and impatience as she shrieked, Lin Yongyi, you old thief, you actually dared to treat me like this. Our Celestial Medicine Valley absolutely won't take this lying down. Lin Yongyi, Lin Yongyi. Ah! Ah! Feng Manyun let out heart-wrenching screams. Shut up! A soldier bluntly slapped Feng Manyun's face before dragging her outside with large strides. His Highness has ordered that all unrelated people are to immediately move out of the city lord's estate and are not allowed to disturb the crown princess's peaceful cultivation. Violators will be beheaded. Let go of me, let go of me, let go of me. Feng Manyun's limbs twitched nervously, and she was so infuriated that her face was completely distorted. Ah! Ah! Feng Manyun's hair accessories, which were wrapped in the quilt, had all fallen to the ground as she struggled. Her disheveled hair made her look like a lunatic. I won't let you off, I won't let you off. Feng Manyun shrieked as she was thrown out of the city lord's estate. The soldiers threw the two of them into a carriage and drove them to the farmstead while screaming. Feng Manyun crawled on the tattered carriage's curtain. Her face, which had turned scarlet and distorted, was imprinted on the carriage window as she shrieked, I won't let you off, I won't let you off. Miss, they're too much. Xiangqin wiped away her tears as she shrieked, Lin Yongyi is ungrateful, treating a member of the Celestial Medicine Valley like this. Miss, we can't take this lying down no matter what. Feng Manyun frantically searched through the bundle beside her. Chapter 749. After rummaging around, Feng Manyun finally pulled out a bottle from her cloth bag. She clutched it tightly in her hand and bellowed while panting heavily, I want all of them to die for me. Die, die, die. Ah! Someone would eventually have to suffer all the humiliation, grievances, and suffering she had to endure. Someone would have to pay a heavy price for this. Ah! Wrapped in the bedding, Feng Manyun convulsed and trembled uncontrollably. Her lips were snow-white, and her gaze was fixated on the bleak scenery outside the window that was constantly moving. My Chow's section break, SSS, SSS. Slivers of wriggling black shadows crawled up the window lattice. SSS. The white snakelet inside Arbor's waist pocket suddenly stuck out its small head, and its watery eyes vigilantly surveyed its surroundings. SSS, SSS. The small black snakes that had burrowed into the room were firmly bound by the binding talisman matrix. No matter how they wriggled, they couldn't break free from the binding talisman matrix. The white snakelet's head was raised high, and its pair of watery eyes turned icy as it stared at those black snakes that had burrowed into the room. Suddenly, a black figure burrowed out from the floor of the room. This person seemed to have burrowed out of thin air, and his figure was abnormally short. If Arbor could open his eyes right now, he would definitely discover that this person looked exactly the same as the pygmy who had tamed the poison-tailed butterflies that she had killed back then. He had a triangular head, different-sized eyes, and one eyebrow was high while the other was low. It was an extremely irritating sight. The pygmy's head and hands were covered with many wriggling small black snakes, and he was even emitting snake hissing sounds to lure the snakes to attack the talisman matrix. He was a snake exorcist, and just like his brother who tamed the poison-tailed butterflies, he also had the ability to drive and tame snakes. Actually, these pygmies were triplets who had followed Shantian Prefecture's Luigi for many years. The one Arbor had killed in the abandoned house back then was the youngest among them, their third brother. This dwarf was the second of the three brothers. The second dwarf's ability was to drive snakes, and he also had a special ability to drill into the ground. The triplets had their own telepathy. The moment their third brother died, the eldest and the second dwarf received their brother's miserable state before he died without using any special external objects such as life lanterns. They also saw their enemy's face clearly. However, Shantian Prefecture had been suppressed by Luigi during this period of time, so they weren't able to leave Balon fortifications to avenge their brothers. However, they had already engraved the appearance of the little demoness who had killed their brother in their hearts. Furthermore, as long as this little demon girl appeared within a radius of 100 miles, the two brothers would be able to sense her exact location. As a result, the moment Arbor set foot in Balon City, the first and second pygmy triplets had actually already sensed this little witch's existence. They had been secretly observing the situation and had only made their move now. What he wanted was this perfect opportunity. The little demoness was actually in closed-door cultivation to advance her cultivation. Ha 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 ha, the heavens were truly helping him. This time, the little demoness aura would be in disorder and she would suffer from chi deviation, even exploding and dying. It wasn't that Arbor, who was currently at the critical juncture of her advancement, didn't know what was happening in the outside world, but she definitely couldn't be distracted. At the same time, the group of people who were standing guard outside her room, led by hidden guard Lightning, had already sensed that something was amiss. With a whistle, everyone drilled out from their hiding places and pounced over with grave expressions, dealing with the snakes that were continuously flooding into the room as quickly as possible. Chapter 750. Lightning and the others did not dare to make too much noise, fearing that they would disturb the crown princess who was cultivating in seclusion. However, the number of snakes was too dense. Lightning made a gesture and everyone spread out, quickly clearing the snakes. Hiss. A fierce look emerged from the white snake's cute eyes as it coldly stared at second dwarf brother's figure that had emerged from the corner. Second dwarf brother moved his feet, a cold smile on his lips as he approached the binding glyph array step by step. Bang! His figure suddenly burrowed into the ground under the watchful eyes of the little white snake. The little white snake was on full alert. In its pair of round eyes, there was already a substantial murderous intent condensing. Whoosh! Second dwarf brother's figure suddenly appeared within the second layer of the mystic guiding glyph array that Arbor had set up. At this moment, the mystic guiding glyph array had already lost its effectiveness due to the passage of time. Second dwarf brother used his special ability to directly avoid coming into contact with the binding glyph array and appeared beside Arbor. His pair of cold old eyes were filled with killing intent. He raised the heavy hammer in his right hand high up and was about to smash it down on Arbor's little head. Second dwarf brother cracked open his mouth and laughed. "Little bastard, let's see if you still have half a life left if you don't die this time." Ha 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 ha. Outside, lightning leaped into the air and let out a shrill cry. With a whistle, hundreds of black shadows gathered from all directions and surged toward the room. Several hidden guards had already heard the noise from inside the room. One by one, they flipped over the window and entered the room, only to hear a hiss, roar coming from inside the house. The roar rolled, and a huge snake as thick as 10 people hugging it opened its huge mouth, swallowing and spitting out black fog. With a boom sound, it penetrated through the roof. Covered in black mist, the snake opened its mouth wide and stared coldly at second dwarf brother who was rapidly retreating with a face full of fear. Hiss! The huge snake roared angrily and swayed its huge tail. Its huge mouth was right next to second dwarf brother's frightened face. In the blink of an eye, he had bitten the upper half of the dwarf brother's body into his mouth with a crunch. As he swung his body around, the messy internal organs fell out and scattered all over the ground. The thick body of the snake was shrouded in darkness. It spiraled through the roof and crashed into a towering tree on the opposite side. Half of the tree withered from the impact. With a series of creaking sounds, the tree broke in half. The upper half of the thick tree trunk came crashing down with a terrifying sound of wind and whistling. All the secret guards in the courtyard were so shocked that they hurriedly jumped onto the eaves. Crunch, 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 crunch. A terrifying grinding sound came from the snake's mouth. Half of second dwarf brother's body was swallowed by the snake's huge mouth, and then it spat it out in disdain. Pieces of flesh fell to the ground, and blood dripped down, as if it was raining blood. All the secret guards looked up in shock at the giant snake that had suddenly emerged from the crown princess room. Oh my God! What level of mystic beast was this? How could it be so violent and terrifying? Hiss! The huge snake spat out its tongue angrily. Its long tongue flung out and directly raised the surrounding trees to the ground. Half of the houses had collapsed. Everyone in the city lord's manor was shocked by this huge noise. What the hell is going on? All the masters and servants in the city lord's manor rushed out of their rooms. Chapter 751. When they looked up, they saw the giant snake that had drilled its way out of the roof. The snake's head was held high above the eaves, and its enormous body was coiling in circles. Even though Lin Yongyi was experienced and knowledgeable, he couldn't help but be speechless at this moment. Hiss! The giant snake spat out a poisonous mist from its mouth. All of the frightened and writhing little snakes were sent flying by this cold wind. Hiss! The giant snake once again let out a terrifying roar, shaking some of the shadow guards who were closer to it. The blood in their hearts surged, and they couldn't help but bleed from the corners of their mouths. The giant snake's coiled body slithered down from the eaves, shrinking inch by inch until it finally shrunk to the white snakelet's original tiny size. With a plop, it limply landed on Qiao Mu's knees. The crown prince rushed over after hearing the news, burning with anxiety. At a glance, he saw that more than half of the wing where Jojo was in had collapsed. His heart began to clench tightly. Jojo! Prince Mo hurriedly ran into the wing, but was shocked to find that his baby's body was wrapped in a patch of emerald green vines. In front of his eyes, she was gradually becoming transparent inch by inch, as if she was about to disappear. Jojo! Mo Lian rushed forward in a panic, wanting to grab her little hand, but her wrist was entangled by several green vines. Master is fine. Relax and cooperate with me. I'll drag you in. Qiao shouted. Right now, it couldn't care too much. It could only waste some of its life force to drag Prince Mo into Paradise Planet first. Mo Lien's heart stirred slightly. Her fingers slid and wrapped around Arbor's somewhat cold fingertips. Suddenly, her vision blurred. When she looked again, she was already in a beautiful paradise. In front of her was a towering tree. It was actually a terrifyingly tall peach tree. Mo Lien had never seen such a mutated peach tree that was so tall that it looked like it could pierce through the sky. The peach trees were laden with fruits. Each peach was as big as a wash basin. This was simply too exaggerated. The vines retreated from his hand, and Mo Lien hurriedly reached out to hold Arbor, who had collapsed and was breathing unsteadily. Jojo, Jojo. Your Highness, don't worry. Master is fine. Please help her sit down and let her continue to absorb the mystic energy here. The little Treant hopped over and directed Mo Lien to move Arbor to the tree so that she could continue to meditate. Little Water Child used water to circle a large pile of magnetite and ran over, piling them up beside Arbor's legs. It's all right now. Let Master continue to absorb the mystic energy. She's about to break through. The little Treant wiped its sweat, and only then did it have the time to run over to observe the little white snake's condition. Mo Lien looked at Arbor for a while. Seeing that her breathing was gradually stabilizing, she couldn't help but sigh in relief. It's fine, it's fine. Chocho hopped around and directed the other little Treants to move the little white snake to the side to rest. The little white snake suddenly transformed and erupted. She should just be exhausted right now. She'll be fine after some rest. You guys. Prince Mo looked at the little Treants in shock. His gaze then swept past the little water child and the little chick. Chocho drooped its head, looking completely exhausted. I also have to go rest. Dragging you in just now was really too tiring. Why don't you send a message to your subordinates first and tell them not to worry? I'll wait for Master to wake up and have her tell you herself. Chocho exhaled with an "ah" and dragged its tired little steps, falling on its back beside Arbor. Chapter 752. This is the paradise, right? Mo Lien muttered to herself. She couldn't help but stroll around Paradise Planet. Although she knew that the heart of paradise had been refined into a mystic domain by Jojo for her own use, she truly didn't know that this little fellow was so resourceful that she could actually merge this mystic domain into her own body. Could it be that she had disappeared for more than 2 years in this place? A thought flashed through Mo Lien's mind. After strolling for a short while, she saw that all of the mystic energy in Paradise Planet was surging toward Arbor, forming a terrifying mystic energy nebula that condensed above Darling Chow's head. Mo Lien hurriedly strolled back to Arbor's side and saw that the little water child was earnestly moving piece after piece of mystic stone into Arbor's hands, allowing her to absorb and use them on her own. His darling was indeed formidable. She needed such a vast amount of mystic energy just to break through to level 11 mystic cultivation. The more mystic energy consumed during the breakthrough, the more stable and solid the realm after the breakthrough. And just now, she had already cleanly absorbed all of the mystic energy in the vicinity of the City Lord's estate within a radius of 50 kilometers in the outside world for about a day. This still wasn't enough. Mo Lien's heart stirred. She stood in front of Arbor, and with a slight movement of her fingers, a thick mystic energy was drawn out of her body and endlessly channeled into Arbor's body. The small tree Chocho, who was lying on the side like a corpse, suddenly moved and exclaimed in its heart, "The Crown Prince's mystic energy is very thick and pure." With his assistance, Little Master's breakthrough this time will definitely be smoother even though there will be some twists and turns. About 2 hours later, Arbor's consciousness gradually became clearer. She used her spiritual awareness to observe her body and saw that the two branch meridians had already undergone continuous training and were now about the same width as the main meridians. She successfully entered the cultivation of the fourth layer of the Spirit Division Record's Soul Chapter and opened the third branch meridian. The fourth layer of the Soul Chapter mainly cultivated the mystic energy in the two branch meridians and the main meridians as one wished, ensuring that the mystic energy in the main meridians was endless and continuous. With this kind of cultivation method, it was equivalent to using the vast and mighty profound energy stored in 3 profound veins to fight against one person. Naturally, the chances of winning would be much higher. The current mystic domain realm was already 2 inches larger than its olive-sized appearance from before. The profound energy from the 2 branch veins and the 1 main vein made a few rounds in the profound veins before the excess profound energy returned to the profound ruins. The mystic domain realm was entangled by the little tree's vines. After absorbing the remaining mystic energy, it was gradually buried into the little tree's roots, disappearing without a trace. When normal mystic cultivators fought, they would use the mystic energy surging in their mystic veins. The mystic domain was equivalent to a replenishment area. If he could be like Arbor and absorb profound energy with the profound domain talisman array, then when fighting, the profound domain realm would be able to continuously absorb profound energy from the outside world. Naturally, the duration of the battle would be extended. If the most fundamental profound energy stored in the profound domain was also completely exhausted in battle, then the situation they faced would be quite dangerous. After all, the speed at which mystic cultivators recovered mystic energy was not fast. If the mystic domain was exhausted and damaged, the mystic veins and even the mystic domain realm were damaged, treatment would become very troublesome. Unless you had some miraculous elixir that could rapidly recover your mystic energy, or you were like those people from large sects who carried some kind of natural treasure that could recover mystic energy at any time. Of course, this kind of thing was very rare. After the mystic domain realm disappeared, Arbor felt that the vast and mighty mystic energy in his body had already successfully broken through the barrier of level 11 mystic cultivator. Level 12 Mystic Cultivator, Entry Level. Chapter 753. Sure enough, this level 11 Mystic Breakthrough Pill was out of the ordinary. It helped her break through the 4 minor realms of level 11 Mystic Cultivator: Gradual Accomplishment, Initial Accomplishment, Phenomenal Accomplishment, and Peak, in one fell swoop, successfully entering the threshold realm of level 12 Mystic Cultivator. However, this was also thanks to her usual cultivation realm suppression and accumulation. Arbor slowly opened her eyes, and there seemed to be star fragments swirling and gathering in her clear and cold eyes. As soon as she opened her eyes, she saw Mo Lien's tall and straight figure imprinted itself into her eyes. That man in white, who was as slender and exquisite as jade bamboo, was currently standing under the towering peach blossom tree beside her and gazing at her with a grin. Arbor immediately crawled up from the ground. She rubbed her eyes and abruptly reached out to pounce at Mo Lien. The man's chuckle deepened. He reached out and caught the little fellow in his arms, pressing her down and stealing a kiss without any explanation. Jojo. Mo Lien. Arbor's little head squirmed in his arms, and she looked up at him. I advanced. Emichim, my Jojo is awesome. Mo Lien reached out to hug her, his eyes turning into crescents as he smiled. Jojo, Jojo. Arbor turned to look around and suddenly seemed to have discovered something. Her gaze landed on the towering peach blossom tree behind the two of them, and she exclaimed in shock, Chocho, Chocho. This tree. Master. Chocho stood up stiffly from under the tree like a corpse coming back to life. It straddled its 2 short legs and wailed as it wriggled over to Arbor's side. Its two forked arms hugged Arbor's thighs and hung on her skirt. Cho-Cho wailed, "Master. I actually wanted to tell you yesterday. I don't know if our family's peach blossom tree ate the wrong thing, but it feels like it's grown a bit perverted." Arbor. Oh right, where's the little white snake? How is it? What could have happened to little white snake? It just used too much force and now needs to rest and recover. Although Arbor had sealed his five senses at that time, his telegnosis could still see the scene of the little white snake biting through the dwarf's second brother. At that time, if it wasn't for the little white snake's attack, his situation would have been very bad. Xiaomu first went to the peach tree to check on the white snakelet that was paralyzed and recuperating there with its eyes closed. After confirming that it was indeed fine, she then pulled Mo Lien towards that perverted peach tree. "Cho-Cho, what's wrong with this tree?" "Master, this peach blossom tree has become so strange. I think it has something to do with that lump of dirt." "What dirt clump?" "Master Silver, go take a look. Do you still remember? The lump of dirt that you took out from the blue wand's wing." With that, Arbor remembered. She hurriedly pulled Mo Lien and ran to the peach blossom tree. Was it that day? She took out that soft lump of dirt from the blue wand's wound and threw it on the ground. Before she left, she stepped on it and it stuck to the bottom of her shoe. She then casually raised her foot and rubbed it against a peach blossom tree, rubbing the soft lump of dirt under the peach blossom tree. It can't be. Arbor hurriedly squatted under the peach blossom tree and pulled at a thin and soft peach blossom petal under the tree. She saw that the thumb-sized lump of dirt was indeed stuck under the peach blossom tree. It's it, Master Silver. How could a normal lump of dirt possibly scratch the blue wand's wing? Coo, coo. Little Chick nodded furiously in full agreement. Chapter 754. Master, if I didn't guess wrongly. The sapling stretched out a branch and propped its chin up in deep thought. This isn't some ordinary lump of dirt at all. I suspect that it's sacred earth. Arbor's little jaw was about to drop. Mo Lien was also a little shocked. She turned her head to look at the sapling's pensive expression and happened to meet the sapling's two little black eyes that were embedded in the tree trunk. Sacred earth. Arbor waved at the little water child lying on the side. The water child let out a jubilant cry and swiftly hopped onto Xiaomu's palm, twisting its small, chubby body in high spirits on her palm. You're saying that that lump of dirt is the same as sacred earth? The sacred earth that surpasses the earth origin. Arbor didn't quite believe herself when she said this. She stretched out a finger and poked at the lump of dirt stuck to the foot of the peach blossom tree. The little lump of dirt actually let out a thin sound, and that lump of dirt rolled a little. Arbor's little hand shrank back. The little water child even cried out in alarm and stretched out its little watery hands to hug Arbor's wrist. It widened its eyes defensively. Be careful, Master, this is a monster. You're a monster yourself. The sapling slapped the little water child's onion head with its branch in annoyance. Guru. The little water child melted into a water blob. Its two blue eyes were embedded in that blob of water, ready to attack at any time. Be careful, Master. Dottie will protect you. What monster are you? What are you? Arbor. The sapling, Cho-Cho, was really angered by this idiot water. You said you were a drop of water, chattering away like a monster all day long, and now you dare to call someone else a monster. Sigh, go. The sapling swung its branch in annoyance and pushed the little water child to the side. Master, Cho-Cho feels a little tired. You take care of this sacred earth, I'm going to sleep for a while. Hey, don't go. You'll have to send us out later, Arbor said hurriedly. All right then. Master, hurry up. The sapling sat down under the peach blossom tree. Little ball, why are you so tired? Is it because I pulled Emolien in? Arbor couldn't care less about that lump of dirt. He hurriedly ran to check on Sapling's clone. Chocho's main body couldn't move in the star field, but seeing how tired its doppelganger was, its main body couldn't be any better. Not entirely. Chocho shook its head and lifted its branch to point at the surroundings. Master, look. Arbor looked around along its branches. Here. Why is the profound energy so thin? Chocho pitifully nodded its little head. Master, once my profound energy is thin, Chocho feels as if I can't breathe. My head is so dizzy and heavy. I want to sleep. Then rest for a while first. Arbor hurriedly reached out to comfort Little Ball. It must be because I just advanced here and absorbed all the profound energy in Paradise Planet. Arbor's gaze was slightly grave as he turned to look at Emolien. Emolien hurriedly said, then is there any way to replenish the profound energy here? Little Ball stealthily swept a glance at Emolien. It leaned weakly against the peach blossom tree and said, you don't have to care about me, let me slowly recover on my own. Sigh. Why are you being so eccentric? Hurry up and say what you have to say. I didn't succeed in reversing the situation. Herda. Chapter 755. Master, normal mystic energy is of no use to me. What I need is the purest mystic energy in the world to absorb, or the essence of mystic energy cultivated in a person's body. The more mellow and rich it is, the more effective it is for my recovery. As it spoke, its beady black eyes swept over Emolien from time to time. Arbor didn't hold back and gave the sapling's head a flick. This sentient tree was still thinking about Emolien. Just how smart was Emolien? When he saw the sapling in this state, he recalled that time in Qinghe town when a tree vine had stealthily crawled up his wrist to absorb his mystic energy. That time, it was this sapling's doing, right? Emolien grinned as she squatted down in front of the sapling, using a patient tone to say, it's not that I can't give you mystic energy, but you have to listen to me in the future. If I want to come in, you have to pull me in at any time. How about it? Deal. The sapling didn't say another word and immediately made the decision. Arbor slanted its beautiful eyes and glared at Chocho, who was ignoring its master's will. The sapling immediately rolled its eyes and fell onto the peach tree. Master, I'm so tired, I can't even keep my eyes open. Your acting is so fake, doesn't your conscience hurt? Sapling, it doesn't hurt. What the hell is conscience? Can it be eaten? Emolien pursed her lips and smiled. She stretched out her wrist in front of the sapling and raised her phoenix eyes slightly. Hurry up. Chocho cheered and its claws immediately climbed onto Emolien's wrist like an octopus and hugged her tightly. Arbor angrily glanced at the person and tree. Chocho, give me a little more time. Don't go overboard. Seeing that the person and tree had already entered the state of transmitting mystic energy, Chao Mu helplessly rolled her eyes. She stood up and looked at the thin mystic energy floating in the air. She thought to herself, the mystic energy in the paradise can only be slowly replenished after she leaves and finds an opportunity to absorb mystic energy from the outside world and convert it to Chocho. Chocho, can't you absorb the mystic energy in the profound stones as a supplement? No. The little water child shook its head in place of Chocho and replied, Master Silver, Chocho's main body supports the entire star field. Actually, all the profound energy in this star region was closely related to Chocho's main body. For every portion of Master Silver used, Chocho's main body would consume a portion more. If its main body consumes too much energy and cannot be replenished in time, it will also affect the stability of the star field, and the paradise will also be damaged. There were always impurities in magnetite and spirit stones that weren't suitable for Chocho to absorb. Only the purest profound energy between heaven and earth could protect Chocho. Or for those with extremely high cultivation, the profound energy essence they cultivated could also help it recover quickly. Like you, Master Silver, the profound energy you cultivate is not good enough. The moment the little water child finished speaking, he felt that there was something wrong with what he said. Something was wrong. Before the round water ball could even jump, Arbor reached out and gave it a heavy knock on the head. What you mean is that the Xian energy in Master Silver's body is not good enough for the Xian energy in Master Silver's body. He let it slip. The water ball hurriedly rolled to remedy the situation. No, Master Silver, Dian doesn't have the slightest intention of despising Master Silver. Ha! The corner of Arbor's mouth twitched and he glanced at the little water bowl. Other than the 2 supplements you mentioned, there are no other ways. Chapter 756. And there's also an extremely rare heavenly treasure called the Black Spirit Jade. It can replenish the energy of us 5 spirits. The little water ball chirped. However, Master Silver, the Black Spirit Jade is very hard to find. It's said that it's buried in the deepest part of a spirit stone mine, but very few people can find the existence of Black Spirit Jade in a spirit stone mine. Sigh. Black Spirit Jade. Arbor muttered to herself. Carrying the little water ball, she walked to the foot of the peach blossom tree and poked at the little clump of dirt that was lying dormant under the peach blossom tree. If you're the sacred ground that little ball spoke of, then flip over and let me see. The little water ball widened its eyes and stared nervously at the little clump of dirt. The little clump of dirt that had been motionless all this time, as if it was playing dead, suddenly moved and really flipped over. It moved from under the peach blossom tree to Arbor's feet with a gurgling sound. Arbor lowered her head and met the little water ball's eyes. Both of them cried out in their hearts at the same time, it really is a clump of dirt that has become a spirit. This peach blossom tree of mine is your doing, isn't it? A green vine quietly crept out from under Arbor's sleeve and whipped at the clump of dirt on the ground. Hurry up and show yourself. The little clump of dirt that was as thick as a thumb jumped and jumped, hiding behind the tree. After a long while, under Arbor's scolding, it stuck its head out from behind the tree. Arbor took a closer look and was almost angered to the point of laughing. This clump of dirt had turned into a square clump of yellow dirt. It had 2 black eyes and was timidly hiding behind the tree to look at her. Come here. Arbor rolled up her little sleeves and used the vine in her hand to draw a bright mark on the ground. Master, let me go catch it. The little water ball immediately helped the tyrant and stretched out its evil claws towards its brother. It spat out a rapidly spinning wave of water from its mouth. Like a water dragon, it bypassed the towering peach blossom tree and suddenly wrapped around the yellow soil block. When the clump of dirt saw the flood of water, it almost peed in fright. It hurriedly squatted down and completely buried itself under the peach blossom tree's roots, shrinking until there was no trace of it. Thus, the little water ball's mighty wave of water rushed all over the peach blossom tree with a splash. Mo Lien and Little Ball, who were under the tree, were drenched from head to toe. Arbor. Cough, cough, cough. Arbor raised her voice to reprimand and reprimanded, Dotard, what are you doing? Don't spray. As she spoke, she hurriedly stepped forward, took out a clean white cloth from her inner world, and hurriedly wiped the water droplets on the man's face. Mo Lien opened his eyes slightly and abruptly grasped one of her fair and tender wrists, abruptly pulling her into his dripping embrace. You did it on purpose, didn't you, baby? Mo Lien blinked at the little fellow and unhurriedly unbuttoned her outer shirt. Her fingers then moved to her waist to undo her belt. Her expression was very captivating. If you want to see your husband's body, just say it. Why did you have to make such a big wave of water and drench your husband? TSK, he's soaked. Arbor, that what can I say? This narcissistic man, I didn't want to see your body. Mo Lien's fingers gently tickled the little fellow's waist. Arbor couldn't help but burst out laughing. She twisted her little body and turned her head to look at him with a slightly red face. She reached out to hit him neither lightly nor heavily. Hurry and dry yourself with the fire spirit. Heh, you got it wet. You're responsible for wringing it dry. Mo Lien moved closer to her neck and nuzzled her head under her hair. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.